With a mission to deliver fiscally responsible, highly dependable services to the citizens of our community and the region with integrity and professionalism, this is the City of Albany Commission Meeting with Mayor Bo Duro, Mayor Pro Tem John Howard, Ward 1, Matt Fuller, Ward 2, BJ Fletcher, Ward 3, Chad Warbington, Ward 4, Bob Langstaff Jr., Ward 5, Demetrius Young, Ward 6, City Manager Sharon Subadale, City Clerk Sonia Talbot, and City Attorney Nathan Davis. This is the City of Albany Commission Meeting.
Good morning. Welcome to the January 19th, 2021 work session of the Albany City Commission. Could we begin by calling the roll, Mr. Hicks?
Ward 1. Here. Ward 2.
Here.
Ward 3.
Here.
Ward 4.
Ward 4 is here.
Ward 5.
Here.
Ward 6.
Here.
Mayor.
Mayor is here. Before we move to the agenda, Commissioner Howard asked to be recognized. Commissioner Howard.
Good morning, Mayor, and to the commissioners and those that are listening and on live screen. Unfortunately, sometimes we forget that it is the creator of the universe that created man. And I would like for this commissioner to have a moment of silence for commissioners that have lost loved one, for city employees that have lost loved one, and we all have been touched by this coronavirus. So if we can stand for a moment of silence to pray and ask God to protect humanity and this world for those that have died from coronavirus. Amen.
The first items on the agenda, we have two public hearings regarding zoning applications. The first is zoning case 21-001, a request to rezone property located at 1300 North Slappy Boulevard from C1 to C2. Ms. Forgy. Yes, sir. Okay. And the Planning Commission voted to approve 5-1 with conditions.
Excuse me for that. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mr. Forgy.
This first case is located at 1300 North Slappy Boulevard. And this is not on, I guess. Okay. The request is to rezone a .41 acre parcel from C1, which is a neighborhood mixed-use business district, to C2, which is a general mixed-use business district. The property is occupied by a convenience store. The fuel pumps and tanks have been removed. The plans are to renovate the existing structure for a drive-through carry-out restaurant with no inside seating. The current zoning allows for a restaurant, but not drive-through service. A successful rezoning will allow for the drive-through. Records indicate that the property has retained its original C1 neighborhood mixed-use business district designation since the city adopted zoning in 1970. Several adjacent properties were rezoned from C1 to C2 in the 1970s and 1980s. Here you can see a map of the surrounding zoning. The subject property is outlined in blue, and it is C1. The surrounding property is all a variety of commercial uses, C1 and then CR further to the east. Next slide, please. A drive-through carry-out restaurant should be suitable with the adjacent commercial operations located on the Slappy Boulevard corridor. The proposed C2 designation and use should not have an adverse effect on nearby commercial properties. There is existing screening at the rear of the property, and it should provide a visual buffer to the adjoining office to the east. Here you can see a picture of the former service station convenience store, including the masonry wall behind it. The current C1 designation allows for a variety of commercial operations, including restaurants, retail sales, medical and dental clinics, and offices. These uses provide an economic use for the property. And there's me. Excuse us, we're having technical difficulties. The road capacity of Slappy Boulevard currently is, 40,000 trips per day, and it has an average daily trip count of 25,200 trips, so it does have excess capacity. According to trip generation manuals, a fast food restaurant with drive-through window with no indoor seating could generate 459 weekday trips per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. The existing building is less than that at 656 square feet. The previous use of the property for a convenience market with fuel pumps could have generated 624 weekday trips per 1,000 square feet of floor area. So you can see that the previous use actually generated more traffic than the proposed use. Okay. So the proposed use would generate 459 weekday trips. The previous use generated 624 weekday trips. Here you can see the proposed, or the subject property with the land use around it. There's offices and retail, auto sales, and repair places. Here you can see an aerial view of that. The future land use map recommends commercial development for this area. The request to rezone to C2 General Mixed-Use Business District is consistent with this land use recommendation. The Planning Commission recommended approval to rezone to C2 with the following condition. The concrete wall to the rear of the property must remain in place, or if removed, must be replaced with screening approved by the Director of Planning and Development Services. That concludes the presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Quirk. Any questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
Good morning, Mr. Paul. How you do?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
It's a restaurant, but you didn't, is it at your, can you divulge the name of the restaurant or just?
I do not know, but the owner of the proposed restaurant is present today.
Okay.
It's a local restaurant, though. It's not a large chain.
Okay,
They would use the existing building.
okay. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Fuller?
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
You answered one of my questions, if they were going to demolish the building and build a new one, but it sounds like you're saying they're going to just renovate the building that's there.
That is correct.
Okay. And how would that drive-through run on the property? The lot looks like it runs north and south. It's much wider than it is deep. So how do you know how they would propose to put the drive-through?
I do not know how the proposed drive-through would go, but I suspect that it would travel in front of the store, between the store and Slappy. I don't think there's room for it to go anywhere else.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I didn't see how it would go on the north side of the property. So I think that should work fine if it's going to be between the building and Slappy. So, okay, thank you. That's all.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No comment.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yeah, and Mr. Forgy, my question kind of similar to Commissioner Fuller's question. So one concern, I think we received an email from one local owner, and even when I go up and down Slappy, the drive-throughs, both at Little Caesars Pizza, the Hip Hop Chicken, those routinely lines go out into Slappy. And so for future consideration, and I think Commissioner Fuller touched on this, I don't know what kind of capacity they have in terms of car storage. You know, I think 3 cars, if you're looking at that canopy, is gonna be in the road. So is that covered under zoning, or do we have any specification in our building codes that says if you have a drive-through, you have to be able to have 4 cars, 8 cars in line, or?
Not to my knowledge. I do not know of anything that would specify that. I mean, that's something we always take into consideration, like when the new Chick-fil-A was built, to keep the cars on the subject property. But I don't know that there's anything that specifies that is a requirement, especially not in zoning, but.
Okay. Well, maybe when the owner comes up, maybe he can explain if he has a plan for that. Then the other question was a concrete wall on the backside.
That's right.
Sounds like there is a dispute about whose property that wall is on, and that's not a matter for us to worry about. But if it's on the current zoning's property, then we're fine. But if that were to be on the neighboring property, then that's going to create an issue with the condition approval, because it wouldn't be on the applicant's property.
Well, from the condition that was proposed, it would, even if it was on the neighbor's property and the neighbor tore it down, the condition would require that the current property owner replace it with another wall of my approving.
Oh, okay.
And I think the letter that you're referring to, the person's concern was that a wood fence would not be sufficient, that if it were torn down, that another masonry wall be put in its place. So I think that was his main concern, even beyond the ownership, that if it ever were to be torn down, that another masonry wall replace it.
Okay. And that would be your decision?
Yes, it would.
Okay. All right. That's it, Mayor.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy.
You're welcome.
The owner, I assume some of the commissioners, I might have questions. Is it Jakowski? Could you come up, please, ma'am? Good morning. I'm sorry, is it Miss Claire Jakowski?
Claire Jakowski.
Jakowski. Yes, ma'am. And your name, please, ma'am?
Suran Zane, Ms. Zane.
Okay.
Zane.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions for Ms. Jakowski?
Good morning.
Good morning.
What type of restaurant would it be?
She has you.
It'll be a fast food restaurant, no dine-in, just pick up and call in, pick up and go.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fuller?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what type of restaurant you said it was gonna be?
A fast food restaurant.
I'm sorry, I don't know if the microphone is,
A fast food restaurant?
a fast food restaurant, okay, and it will just be a local, or is it a chain restaurant?
No, it's not a chain restaurant. It's just like a family business. Just
Okay.
right now, the first
And
one.
and do you propose that the drive-through would be situated between the building and Slappy?
Yes, I think it just, the drive-through will be in the area where the city permitted to be on it. Because I'm just representing my brother, and I actually haven't seen the plan of the building actually is where the drive-through gonna be. But, I think it's just gonna be the area where the, city gonna permit it to have at, either this way or the other way. As long as it got the people drive in and can go out around the building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No comment.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it just a second ago. So you're going to keep the building as is, and you're going to keep the canopy where the fuel pumps used to be?
Right now, we try to see, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a plan, and it's gonna be go by the city if it permitted. We try to remodel it or renovate it as suited to what the city will permit it to be done. If a canopy gonna be there, if the city said okay, then we would probably not touch too much, because as it is, we just want to do it like a very simple restaurant, just probably inside just got like a couple, 2 or 3 fryers and a walk-in cooler and a freezer, and probably that's it, with a little preparing table. And basically we don't do any dining, only like few chairs, like 5 or 6 chairs for waiting, and people come in basically through drive-through, where people they already order and just come and pick. So it shouldn't have like a lot of traffic back there, because everything it'll be just like on there on the table, just like the Popeyes or something like that. Chicken, put in a box and go.
Okay. All right,
Thank you.
cool. Thank you. That's it.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And no one else, if I'm correct, Mr. Hicks, signed up? Sir? Okay. Well, the first public hearing is closed. The next matter is zoning case 21-002, a request to rezone property located at 1701 and 1703 West Gordon Avenue from R2 to C2. Planning Commission voted 7-0 to deny the request. Mr. Forgy.
Thank you. Here you can see the 2 parcels in question, 1701 and 1703 West Gordon Avenue. They're on the north side of Gordon at the intersection of Magnolia and Gordon. The applicant requests to rezone 2 adjoining parcels totaling 0.52 acres from R2, which is a single-family residential district, to C2, which is a general mixed-use business district. The parcels are occupied by 2 single-family dwellings, or a single-family dwelling each. A successful rezoning will allow for a convenience store with fuel pumps. Zoning records indicate that the properties have retained their original R2 single-family zoning since the city adopted zoning in 1970. The adjacent area has retained its original R2 designation and is developed as a residential neighborhood, the Avondale subdivision. Here you can see the subject property outlined in blue, and the surrounding property in yellow is all R2, except for a spot of CR, and then to the west, a block is a spot of C1, which I'll talk about more in a second. The property is located in a residential neighborhood. Single-family dwellings occupy the 2 parcels and the adjacent area. A commercial operation sited in the midst of a residential area would not be compatible with the residential neighborhood. The nearest commercial use, a convenience store with fuel pumps, is located at 1801 West Gordon, about 1 block away to the west. That was that spot of C1. The adjacent residential neighborhood could experience adverse effects associated with a commercial use, including night lighting, outdoor advertising, noise generated by patrons, traffic, air conditioners, and emptying of dumpsters, pedestrian traffic between commercial and residential properties, and late hours of operation. Certain uses allowed in the C2 district could present adverse effects on residential properties, including the following: bars, lounges, event centers, restaurants with drive-through service, motor vehicle-related services. The current R2 designation allows for single-family housing, including daycares, family care homes, and child-caring institutions with special approval. These uses provide an economic use for the property. The road capacity of Gordon Avenue is not available. However, in 2019, it had an average daily trip count of 7,200. South Magnolia has a capacity of 10,500, and the average daily trip count was 6,800. According to trip generation manuals, convenience market with fuel pumps could generate 624 weekday trips per 1,000 gross square feet of floor area, and the size of the store is not known at this time. South Magnolia Street has the capacity to support additional trips. Traffic capacity for Gordon Avenue is not available. However, traffic has decreased from an ADT of 9,600 in 2010 to the current ADT of 7,200. The intersection of Gordon Avenue and Magnolia is signalized, which should provide vehicle and pedestrian safety at this location. Here you can see the surrounding land use. Notice it's solidly residential, mostly single family, a duplex or 2 here and there. Here's an aerial view of that, and again, to the west, a block is the existing convenience store. The future land use map, the rezoning proposal is not in conformity with the future land use map, which recommends low density, an average of 4 units per acre, residential housing for the adjacent area. The comprehensive plan The land use element of the comprehensive plans offers the following recommendation to guide land use and zoning decisions. Protect stable, established neighborhoods from commercial encroachment while providing for properly designated and maintained commercial development along appropriate commercial corridors. The land use element does not identify Gordon Avenue as a commercial corridor from Slappy to Willie Pitts Jr. Road. The intersection of Gordon and South Magnolia is not identified as a potential commercial node. The closest commercial use is located at the northwest corner of Gordon and Shadowlawn, which is Zone C1 and is occupied by a convenience market with fuel pumps. The Planning Commission recommend denial to rezone to C2. That concludes the presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions?
Paul, what's the distance, do you know the distance between this site and the site down there on Magnolia, where there's another convenience store?
I do not. On Magnolia to the north,
Right,
I do not know the distance.
okay. So this would be closer up to the Slappy, going back towards Slappy, right?
Probably, yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Could we put that map back up there? It's on Broad. Could we retrieve that map? Maybe that's
Yeah,
on there.
I don't think it goes there.
No, it doesn't go that far. Okay, I'm sorry.
I can look it up while we're...
Okay.
I'm looking. If you have any other questions, I can... well, it's probably a little bit closer than it is to Slappy. Um, 350 feet. Well,
That's
no,
wrong.
that's not correct.
That's wrong.
Yep, that's not correct.
Well, can we get it? Mayor Pro Tem, it's at least 8 blocks, because you got to go to Lincoln, Avalon, yeah, that's a bunch. Any further questions? Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Forgy, we can get that information for
Certainly.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yep,
Can
we can get that.
Commissioner Fuller?
No questions?
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Warbington?
Yeah, Mr. Forgy, a couple of questions. That CR zoning just to the north of it, is that property vacant?
That's what the map says, yes.
Satellite image looks like it's vacant.
That is correct. Let's see.
Do you have any information when that was on CR or why?
It's in the packet, but I do not know off the top of my head. I can get that to you, certainly.
Yeah, that might be helpful, just know,
What it is and
because that would
when
be
it was
one
owned.
change in the area, just know
Certainly.
when and why, or what was planned when somebody did that CR.
Right.
Because other than that, it is R2 all the way around it. My other question is, typically in zoning, and I guess I use the term step-up zoning, is it irregular to go from R2 all the way to C2? Isn't that kind of like 4 steps or 3 steps? Typically,
It's
you
certainly
go from-
unusual. It really has to be case by case, and if the surrounding land use had changed where that was appropriate, that would certainly, could make sense. But in this case, we believe that because the surrounding land use has not changed and it is still residential in character, it would be quite a transition.
Okay. And then, you know, if this property went C2, the neighboring properties could very easily become CR, or C1, or C2, including the 4 corners of that intersection.
Right, especially because it's at an intersection that's signalized. If this corner went, the others would have much more incentive to change from residential to commercial.
Okay. All right. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. I just want to acknowledge the emails that we received from members of that community, from Mrs. Julie Moultrie, Mrs. Maddie Wright, and also Mrs. Linda Powers. This is, again, a heavily residential neighborhood, and they're very active members of the community who do not want to see the residential character of this neighborhood change. I will acknowledge that this intersection is a very, very busy intersection because of all the residential traffic. But again, I would, just, like to see, Mr. Forgy, if there is, some type of foreseeable community planning that we could do for cases like this that involve a drastic change, or somebody requests a drastic change, where we may, see our way to doing community planning in a way that change is eased into and is palatable to the surrounding community.
Okay, well, as mentioned about the comprehensive plan, that was the point of the comprehensive plan, to find out what the community wanted. And at that point in time, the community wanted to remain residential. And we, the Planning Commission, the City Commission, all agreed that that intersection and that community should remain residential rather than transitioning. So typically that would be the process. Certainly it can be amended at any time if the community decides this is a node, or any node in the city, that should transition from residential to commercial. We could change the future land use map and the comp plan to reflect that. So if the citizens are strongly interested in changing that, we would be happy to work with them.
Okay. I just noticed that I guess the gentleman who had the property, and I don't know if you all have any, I guess, information on that. I think he may be either renting his current store from the gentleman that has a convenience store to the west, right near the railroad track. And I think his complaint was that gentleman won't do anything to, I guess, renovate that particular building. So he's looking to build one of his own that's going to be new. And I would like to see us try in some way to, assist him with that, whether that's some help from community economic development, or, just maybe some more site planning where he could find a suitable site to build if that's what he wants to do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. One thing, Mr. Forgy, is sort of tangential. When you talk about the analysis, the traffic counts here, in 2010, 9680, and the current traffic counts 7210. It's down about 25%.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I understand might be some decreased population, but tell me, are the traffic counts taken on the same day of the week?
They're done to be a sample, so they are taken in the same methodology each time, but for a variety of reasons, population loss, or just because, depending on what week it is, it could be a week where people are traveling less for some reason. So they are meant to be comparable to one another, but just because of outliers, it's possible that they're not exactly comparable.
Could you access and provide information about
The
when
methodology?
these traffic counts were taken?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Forgy.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Butt, are you here? Did you want to speak? Mr. Barra? Good morning, Mr. Barra.
Morning. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words, and I certainly can hear what the residents are saying about their neighborhood, and they ought to have something to say. It's not that Kasif is trying to force this issue. He bought a couple of residential properties, and he probably should have got it rezoned before he paid for them and bought them. It is a neighborhood that's somewhat in decline, and it's because of loss of population. It's because some of the commercial establishments have moved east towards Slappy, up Gordon. I guess that makes sense. Some of the questions that came up, the Magnolia and the Gordon intersection, there's a good bit away from the Magnolia and the Gillionville intersection is probably, I don't know, a quarter of a mile away. And of course, you're off of Slappy a good ways at the intersection of Magnolia and Gordon. These two residents are run down that Kasief purchased. And in many ways, in our minds, we think it's a gentrification of the area. It's an improvement. It gives them, Kasief runs the other store that you referenced, and he would, of course, vacate that store. It's run down. It's got 2 units that are vacant in that facility that have pretty much never been occupied. But again, no one's trying to force the issue. Kasief's not trying to force the issue. It just, in our minds, it was just a 2,400 square foot C-store fits very nicely on that property. There's room for it. And, you know, in our minds, it's just a much better situation than the store that's 2 blocks away to the west. So, but, you know, I know Kasief wants to be a good neighbor. That's the people that come to his store are the ones that would have to support him in that neighborhood. And if they, you know, if they objected vehemently to him being there, it wouldn't be kind of a few levers. But he has good traffic. He has good clientele. He has people that come in every day and see him and do business with him. And he was, you know, in his mind, our mind, we just think we're improving the situation. Is there everything you wanted? Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you, guys.
Any questions, Mayor Pro Tem, for Mr. Barrow, Mr. Booth?
I have no question, but when Mr. Barry and the client get to speaking on it, I want to ask Paul a question.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fuller?
No question.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No question.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yeah, just one question for Mr. Butt. So you are planning to have, you're wanting to do a gas station fuel island.
Yes, sir.
And then what about alcohol? Were you going to end up selling?
Yes, sir. The convenience store, all convenience store mostly have the alcohol, cigarette, and gas. There are 3 the main thing on the convenience store.
Okay.
Yes,
and guess I would just say that.
On the same neighborhood, almost I'm 12 years on the same neighborhood. Everybody know me, and that's the reason I try to build up new one. Because all my gas don't have gas, it's just store. And 2 more down street has more stores. They even don't have gas. In that Gordon, nobody have gas, and that's why I try to build up new one to give you the new pump, new gas. That's only the reason I try to talk to owner, who's my owner. He don't want to spend money. He don't want to do anything, and that's my problem. I can't do on his property anything because I'm the owner for that property.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess that would be the other hurdle, is the alcohol license
Yes,
that would come later, but that would also present some challenges with residents being so close. That's another, you know, hurdle that probably would, you know, I don't know how the vote would go, but that would be a challenge based on what we've considered in the past. But anyway, I appreciate your entrepreneurism, trying to grow. The challenge is sometimes if you look at those lots as an island, it would be a great project, you know, nice store, I'm sure, great business. The challenge is the influence it would have on properties around it, and that's really what we have to consider is, you know, a person behind you, a person to the right, to the left, or even a person 2 or 3 neighborhoods away. That's the challenge as we start thinking about, you know, not whether what you are going to do, is it better than the 2 current houses? I'm sure it'll be a lot better than the 2 current structures that are there, but what influence it would have on the surrounding area is really what we're trying to consider.
Just asked a question. Is it, the store that he has now, is it not in a residential neighborhood already?
You talking about the one down?
Yeah, the 2 blocks down.
Well, I don't have the surrounding.
Paul could probably answer that, but I think it's in a residential neighborhood now.
It probably is surrounded. I don't know going back. I mean, we'd have to get the printout from him, but that's a good point, but I don't know the answer.
Hold on, Mr. Fogel. Can we, I think Mayor Pro Tem had another question for you, so let's go around the table and then we'll Commissioner, is that all?
That's it, yeah.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your comments and being here today. Again, though, what we're dealing with is not just, you know, kind of what is looked as an improvement to the area. We're looking at the effect of that many alcohol outlets in that area. If you placed another store within that area, there would be 1, 2, 3, 4 convenience stores within a quarter-mile radius going all the way out to Willie Pitts Road West. And these are convenience stores that are not, you know, in my opinion, of high quality. I know a new one would probably be better, but you would still be adding to the number of alcohol outlets in that area. And when you're talking about, you know, improvement in an area, more alcohol outlets does not lead to improvement, especially with a neighborhood that is that densely populated with residential homes and houses. That area now already, like you said, does suffer from some decline. There's, you know, kind of some you know, traffic that goes through there that is not necessarily a positive thing in terms of maybe some houses that suffer from, you know, drug use and things like that. So, you know, just doing that at this particular time is I would just implore you to, you know, take advantage of the city's resources to maybe look at another location or work with the planning commission to, you know, kind of strategize a way to, you know, try to find your way to do something that's going to, you know, minimize that impact or change the, do a gradual change to that particular area. Again, you got 4 stores within a quarter-mile radius going west. I know we keep talking about Magnolia, but Magnolia is not the issue. It's actually Gordon going back west toward Willie Pitts Road. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Barrow. Thank you, Mr. Butt. Thank you. Mr. Forgy. Mayor Pro Tem, you had a question for Mr. Forgy?
Paul, let me ask you a question.
Certainly.
Mr. Barrow made a good observation, and just to think outside of the box in the near future, as he stated that maybe the owner, before he purchased the property, could have been aware that it was in a residential neighborhood, and we would have to change change the zoning for it, in which we don't know. But what I'm concerned about, and as he said, that a lot of these communities like the south side, the east side, you know, declining population, and when a person come in and purchase property, would it be to that person advantage before he or she purchased the property that they can give a site plan, what they want to build there, that it is up to the planning commission and the city commission to make that decision? I know it's complicated, but at the same time, we're seeing convenience stores pop up on the corner of different areas, whether it's Arteria Street or Collector Street. Is there anywhere we can, like the guy had purchased the property, thought that he would have no problem doing it, or what?
Well,
that's a $1 million question.
Yeah, I'm not sure what his assumption or his due diligence was, but that is really what it boils down to: due diligence on the part of the buyer, and the realtor being responsible for letting the buyer know that what can be done with the property and what the hurdles might be to doing what the client wants to do. And I'm not sure if he used a realtor or what was said to him. But we do have these conversations frequently, but it really depends on an educated buyer knowing what the pitfalls may be, and having done it before is a good way to know what the pitfalls are. So when you have someone who may have never done this before, that's when it runs into trouble. And we don't have any way of knowing when they're out there until the purchase is made, or they come to us after the purchase most of the time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Fuller? Any further questions, Mr. Forgy?
No other questions.
Sir?
No, sir, no further questions.
Mr. Fletcher?
No, sir, no questions.
Mr. Warmington?
Yeah, just, I guess to add to the follow-up, so if you could get some info on the CR that's north, and then the
It's vacant.
C1 that's to
I
the...
don't know what the history is, but it is a vacant parcel, and in the tax records as far back as 5 years ago, it was vacant also. So I can look and find out why it was changed and what it was, but it is and has been vacant for some time.
Okay. And then to the west, I guess the current convenience store he owns is a C1,
Yes.
and maybe just the history of that might be good to know. And then I don't think there's any more after that one. There's really no commercial until you go around the curve.
That's correct. Yeah,
And get over towards
then it starts
University.
up more. But
Yeah.
if I could, the existing convenience store is Zone C1, but it was built in 1970, and that's when the city implemented zoning. So it's quite possible that the plans were already submitted and it was underway before the property was even zoned. And just off the cuff, we wouldn't recommend that currently because it is surrounded by residential. But it most likely, it appears to predate zoning.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Okay, so, what, is there any type of, I guess, best practices in terms of, you know, how many convenience stores or alcohol outlets that you know of that should be located in a general area?
I'm not familiar with any standard best practice. I do think it has to be balanced by the density of the community, the type of community you have. There are a lot of different factors, so I can't say that a one-size-fits-all approach would even work because it does vary based on the character of the community, the density of housing, and a variety of other factors. So, but I'm not familiar with anything.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy.
You're welcome.
We have 3 people signed up, but I think, Mr. Hicks, we got a couple of folks signed up for the last application. Sue Zing and Glenda Moy are both at 1300 North Slappy, so I guess those are 2 of the ladies who spoke previously. And we have Miss Maddie Wright. Miss Wright, how are you doing this morning? Fine, thank you. Please, well.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, my name is Maddie Wright. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Planning Commission's denial of the zoning for 21-002, the convenience store there at the corner of Magnolia and Gordon Avenue. As Mr. Young has said, there are several convenience stores already there. The one that the gentleman is occupying now at 1801 West Gordon has plenty of space for parking. There's a park where people used to go and, take the kids and everything. There's plenty of space back there. So what he's wanting to do at 1701 and 1703 West Gordon is just not enough space for the convenience store and gas pumps. I don't know if he knows about checking with the fire marshal about putting gas pumps right there. If there should be an emergency explosion or something like that, all of those residences would go up in smoke. And I don't think that's a good idea for him to put gas pumps there or a convenience store. Also, as the planning people had mentioned, the traffic, the lighting, maybe some peeping Toms and things like that, going around the neighborhood, his patrons. So I would like for you all to adhere to the recommendations of the Planning and Zoning Board to deny this at this time. Perhaps this gentleman, someone can find an area of the city-owned property or something that he could be able to live out his dream of a convenience store and pumps. But right in that area, I don't think that is a good idea to put something like that there unless more of those homes become vacant and are torn down, then he might be able to put his convenience store there. I understand his plight to have bought something and then you can't, put the convenience store there. But right now, I don't think that is a good idea, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and many of the neighbors in that vicinity. So I'm asking that the committee deny it at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, Ms. Wright, hold on, if you don't mind, hold on. See if anybody has any questions. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions for Ms. Wright?
Good morning, Ms. Wright. How you
Good
doing?
morning.
What a coincidence. I was cleaning out my room last night, and for unfortunate, when you wrote your telephone number down several years ago, it's amazing that I ended up seeing your name there and your cell phone, and seeing you again today. So you feel that putting another convenience store in a depressed neighborhood will not be conducive for the surrounding area, right?
No. No.
Okay.
You have so many homes that are so close to that area. And I think someone mentioned about it being a depressed area. But if this gentleman can take those two homes, maybe renovate them and rent them out, and you all help him find another place where he might be able to put his convenience store, that might be a better option at this point.
Just thank you for showing up and speaking in opposition to it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fuller?
No questions?
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Worthington?
Ms. Wright, thank you so much for coming to speak to us. For everybody's knowledge, Ms. Wright is the captain or president of the local neighborhood watch group that kind of straddles Commissioner Young and my ward right there on Gordon. I would have to say, I got a message from you about the sign before I even saw, so I appreciate your engagement. You are very knowledgeable of your area and in touch with what the comings and goings. And so I appreciate even you flagging me. That caused me to go by and see the sign before we were even notified in our agenda packet. So thank you so much. And I guess my only question for you is, you know, being the captain and the president, you obviously have the hand on the pulse of your neighbors. I mean, do you feel like it's an overwhelming majority that would be for this or against this?
The overwhelming majority would be against it, even though it's not our ward. We have a lot of people in our neighborhood watch group that comes in from Ward 6, and they are against this as well. And we feel that all of this area, pretty much, we're like family in this area and everything, so we like to see it, you know, continue to do well, you know. And when I saw the signs, I did drive through, go down the alley and things like that, just looked at it to see, you know, if that would work in that area, and it won't. I don't believe it will work at this time.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming. I know in the times of COVID and all, you come speaking on the behalf of a lot of people, and there probably would have been more people here speaking had we not been in the times we're in, but I appreciate you coming out and speaking on behalf of all your neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
Thank you, Mr. Wright, for your comments, and I do appreciate you, I guess, just recognizing that, you know, that the neighborhood, you know, could possibly make those changes gradually, but just trying to do that right now. You know, we have to look at a more of a transition into something like that, and not just disrupt the neighborhood, you know, in one fell swoop like that. But thank you so much for coming down, and thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. No one else has signed up to speak. Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? If not, the public hearing is closed. We will continue with the agenda. We have one speaker signed up, Mr. William Wright. Mr. Wright, you prepared?
Not you. First of all, Happy New Year to you. And one of the things that you might notice on your agenda document when you look at the pages, there is some problem. We applied to present to you on December 1. Now, it shouldn't take 6 weeks for a citizen to come before you to speak. And we had some information that was time sensitive and made sure that people understood that, but everyone kept giving one roadblock after another. And that simply should not happen. Now, we're going to present a couple of things to you. The first thing is this part of our New Deal. This is a Green New Deal. The commission is an MDE program. And we're going to be working on that this year and working with people who are elected to office who do not subscribe to that. Just like we saw the turnover on November 3rd and January the 5th. So this presentation is about diversity, inclusion, and economic opportunity. And again, it took us 6 weeks to get through the hurdles to bring this information before you. First, Mr. Brooks told us, well, you need to go and meet with Susan, Jill, and Jack, and that kind of thing. And, you know, those things were just unnecessary. I shouldn't have taken that because it was time sensitive. One of the things that you have in your packet is information on a program that the SBDC, the Small Business Center, the Georgia Tech, Economic Development Commission, no one brought this information to us, but you heard about the PPP program. Well, black businesses did not fare well on that, so that's why we're bringing this to you. That it's something called the SMOBI syndrome, and that's a publication that is produced by the Bureau of Census. The United States Bureau of Census used to produce this report on the different ethnic groups and business. And when we look at the payroll protection program, black businesses locally did not fare well, so that's why this is about an entrepreneurial academy, economic opportunity. That's why you have that proposed minority business program. And you might ask Mr. Forgey or someone else from knowledge about the census reporting, but that report details peculiarities that impact adversely minority business. So we'll go on and get started, and I need to disclose one thing, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner, that I serve as a panelist for the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System for the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. That's why I went with patrons who could participate in this program that details the new Main Street Loan Program. The reason this was so important, Mayor and Commissioners, the Main Street Program was one of the few programs that Congress has ever put out where it was designated for small businesses, those businesses with at least 10 employees but less than 15,000 employees. And the federal government would buy your note. You could go to any one of the participating banks, borrow $100,000. The federal government would turn around and buy that note, whether it was Synovus or SunTrust or Bank of America or Ameris. They would buy 95% of that note and give you 5 years to pay it back and 2 years before the first payment was due. And at the end of 5 years, if you have not been able to pay it, then they would give you a balloon note. Now that's in the data that we presented to you and what we was trying to get the people to see. When they told us to go and see Miss Phyllis Brown, we went to do that. And of course, the city gave about $865,000 their care funding. Well, if you look at the information that's part of your handout, Adams Exterminators got more money than that by themselves. They got $1 million from the PPP program. All these details in your packet, so we'll go ahead and get started. I've done the disclosure. And if you begin on page 45, you have the information, the usual legacy data about this being one of the SMSAs with prevailing and pervasive poverty and no opportunity, just like the zoning case that was just before you. That designation can be removed if we follow this template. So when we go to 45 and 46, it details why we're doing this. Now, On 47, you see the problem that cripples most small businesses, and minority businesses in particular. 48 is how do we mitigate that? We're proposing Entrepreneurial Academy. All right, we look at 49. The first program, Mayor Commissioner, would be the DBE program. The reason is that the City of Albany, Dougherty County Commission, and Dougherty County Board of Education go through $1 billion. That's $100 million in 18 months. Yet the minority population, the reason we have so much downturn and such is so pervasive poverty, and the reason we are tier 1 by the Georgia Department of Revenue, unemployment, poverty, lack of opportunity, is because the only thing we receive from that $100 million is occasional payroll. All the contract opportunities will never get to us because of systemic discrimination and other things, and that's what the Entrepreneurial Academy that you have worked to guard against on page 48. When you look at the fact that our community is 80% African American and black, city and the county, and that's with a 63% return rate, which means that the number is actually higher than 40% when it comes to poverty. It means the population is more than that's been presented to us, because only 63% of returns are personally reported to the request to complete their census data. So we don't know what it's going to be from 2020 when it's released, but we know it's not going to be far above that. It's probably going to be below because of the pandemic. Now, a couple of other things I want to bring to your attention. You can see the DBE program. The reason we bring that to you, that's on page 4950, is because every year the City of Albany get about $10 million through this program. Again, federal law requires that a certain percentage go to DBEs. So, yet, we never get over that hurdle of 10 or 12%. 80% of the population cannot get but 10% of the $10 million that come through our transit program and the airport. This money comes every year, and the federal government handles transportation throughout the country. So everywhere there's transportation, if you have a transit system or an airport, some of that money is designated to go to minority business, but it does not happen because of systemic discrimination that we're working to overcome. Now, you look on, you see the other programs. Let me call your attention to the page 53. That's the 8A program. That's the other program we're asking you to look at in that DBE proposal that you have. On 53, you can see the 8A program, Public Law 100-656. That means that
Mr. Wright, could you wrap up in 2 minutes?
Okay, remember now, it took me six weeks to get here.
Okay. We already given you 5 minutes extra, so go ahead. Yes, sir.
Okay, let's look then. We want to do, on page 54, you have the 8A program, page 55. You begin to see the 8A program is one of the few programs that has been sustainable because you're in there for 9 years. You're given 10 years and there's limited competition or no competition. Yet there are 30 million businesses in the United States. You know, there are only 10,000 that are 8A certified. Only 10,000. It's a very close and unique membership. So the 8A program, DB program, the two that we are proposing. Well, I'll go on and take us to page 58. You see, this is a program we were bringing to, and again, I've disclosed the fact that I'm on the panel for the Board of Governors Federal Reserve System. Doesn't pay very much money, but I still do it. Now, when we look at that, you have information on 58 that shows. Not only that, the city has 4 conduits that could have worked this program. This is what I kept telling Mr. Brooks. This new Main Street loan program had 3/5 of $1 trillion in it, and it still had some of that money. We didn't know about it because no one told us. I went around and telling everybody, went to the county, went to the school board, telling them, there's nowhere you know of that the federal government will buy 95% of your note. You can borrow from $100,000 to $50 million. It's not limited to for-profit entities. The city has the Economic Development Commission, the Payroll Development Authority, the Downtown Development Authority, and Attica. Each one of them could borrow $10 million each and have loans throughout 5 years to help bring this economy around. So what we'll do, since you've already denied us with the 6 weeks, but Mayor, we would ask that you put a task force on this, because we're going to come back to you next month for Black History Month with continuation on that DBE program, as well as our Green New Deal that we're working on. Been working with commissioners, appointed officials, both elected officials and ones who, for whatever reason, have retired or lost their tenure on the commission. This Green New Deal is about 10 items we're working on to reverse the decline we have here, because we're Smallville. And the thing that I brought to your attention, Mayor, was when we were at the Economic Development Commission meeting. I worked for an organization that had 5,000 employees right here in Albany called Firestone. I was a union divisional chief and on the policy committee for all of the rubber worker organizations in the world. And when we had that, one of the things was you had to learn how to solve problems. So we do know a little bit about that. So I ask for your consideration, and if there's any time left before this meeting close, let me continue, because if you run through this, we're going to miss opportunities like that, which I've just disclosed. How many of you knew that you could borrow $100,000, $50 million, and have 5 years to pay back, your first payment not due for 2 years? And the federal government, about 95% of the contract through the local bank. SunTrust, Synovus, and Bank of America was in this. I took people there to get these loans. So.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions, Mr. Wright?
Good morning, Mr. Wright. How you do?
Happy New Year, that's how I'm doing.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned that minority business in this PPP program got very little money in the city of Albany, Georgia?
Right. What happened, the Smobey syndrome, and Mr. Ford may be able to find it. I have copies of the Smobey report, but what happened is the structure of the minority business. See, what the PPP program was originally being upon 941. 941. So if you issued a 1099, you couldn't get anything. To give you an example, what we found out was the minority business got the loans that was below $150,000. Jeff Senior got $1 million. Well, anyway, in your handout, you have, it's alphabetized all of the people who got money. The big money, I'm talking about $350,000 of the $5 million, like Sherwood and the Ark and other places. We didn't know about that, but the formula is 2.5, based on your 941 annualized. To give you a quick example, Mayor, let's just say your monthly payroll is $20,000. If you multiply that times 12, that's going to be what, $240,000? Your PPP loan for that will end up being $51,000 that will be forgiven or grant. If you take that to a 1099, the money will be the same, but you have recaptured by the IRS for the Medicare or the FICA tax. So in that case, instead of getting $51,000, you would end up with a net of $13,000 because you would owe the IRS $37,000 for recaptured Medicare and Social Security taxes. Well, the problem is from Smobey, 75% of minority businesses, 4 million of them, don't have employees. They have 1099. So the structure has to be changed. One of the things that we're going to begin with Congressman Bishop and the 2 new U.S. senators, change the formula when it comes to the 1099 from 2.5 to 5. That's the only way you can offset or mitigate the effect of recapturing Social Security and the Medicare tax. But that's why the minority business did not do well. 85% of them have issued 1099s instead of 941. The program was regimented on 941s and you have no payroll. So you can see how you would end up being in a mess if you had a monthly payroll of $20,000. Now, that's one of the things that we want to teach at this academy, how to understand and to look at your options for that. Should I have 941s or W-2 employees, or should I issue to everyone a 1099? Because you're making it bad for them as well as yourself. So that's what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Commissioner Fuller?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No question.
Commissioner Warmington?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Thank you, Mr. Wright, for the knowledge that you always drop. I actually heard you talk about this on Pastor Pettibone's radio show, I think maybe 2 weekends ago. But what reason that you say that you weren't able to come before us?
Well, it was that thing where you go to Jack, and then Jack said, well, one of the reasons they gave me was, they said, well, the commission is having this, your Christmas break, you know, because I came January 6th, I came December 15th, I came the week before that. And that's what I was given. I said, well, we cannot. See, I submitted the PDA and everything. I did it by email. So I sent it, so it was no question. And then I was so, and of course my ISP give me some trouble too. You know how they give you a limit on your data. So, but I just still don't think it should have taken 6 weeks. But that's what I was given. I'm not gonna call any names. You know, that's not a thing. But
Yes, sir, I understand. I just want to, you know, kind of, because especially if we're dealing with, you know, time-sensitive material, and where would you think this information would, I guess, in the city best be applied? I know you mentioned a number of the agencies such as Attica and Downtown Authority and so forth, but I mean, if you have this information, I would think that somebody in the city staff would also be privy to this information too, especially if it's federal money. So I guess where did we kind of, if you're saying that if your contention is that we missed this opportunity, where did we miss it?
well, I think it was a breakdown in communication. See, one of the things is, when we spoke with the people of the city staff, we asked that you heard about this, and we tried to tell them it's time sensitive. Now, part of the problem, well, I'm just going to be honest about it. It was President Trump. He told the Secretary of Treasury and the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System to sort of be quiet about it. And I wouldn't have known if I wasn't on the panel. But they started off with a finite life. That is, the program, if you look at the legend and the distribution that I provided for you, the program started October 30th to December 31. That's 60 days. So that tells me that someone had told them that we did not want the public to have it. They put almost $1 trillion in there. Almost $1 trillion. 60-day finite life. Now, when you check the legend, and this is the thing about the question you asked, Commissioner Young, see, the thing is, in the legend, it has the details that the program will stay and be a breathing document until the money ran out. But I know you cannot run out of $600 billion in those 60 days. But the thing is, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System is not following that mandate because the money was not gone, but when we went back and checked, and I knew about it because, again, you know, I worked for them. So they extended it to, when I tried to come here on January 6th, they extended it to that Friday. So we actually had about a week or so in 2021. And I kept telling the staff that this is an opportunity that we may not see in our lifetime, but the reason, well, when I went to the county, I explained to the county had 6 authorities. Each one of those authorities could borrow $10 million because not-for-profits are eligible. The church is eligible to do this, any not-for-profit, so they can get the money. The thing is, when we look at the payback period, the authorities such as the EDC could borrow money, and they make money from it. First of all, the federal government buys 95% of the note, and they pay all of the fees. I'm talking about the federal government, the Board of Governors. Every time the bank issues a loan, they make $1,200. The federal government paid the bank to do this. Pay them $1,200, they call it a transaction fee. Now, if Attica was to jump on this, as I tried to tell them, if they had jumped on this, they could have borrowed that money, $10 million, would have cost them 2.5%. And they could loan it out at 2.5%. So the net cost, that would be 5% that we could issue and make loans to this community for 5 years at least. But keep in mind, at the end of 5 years, you get a balloon note. So if you don't have the money, they give you another 5 years to pay it back. That's how you do it. Think about it. Those 4 entities, the Payroll Development Authority, I was at a PTA meeting, and they issued $500 million for M&M Mars. We didn't know a thing about it. Issued $500 million for the local Mars here. And they in turn gave it to the Mars all over, the world. So, but that was the plan idea we had, was let the county and 6 entities borrow $10 million. That's how you build a capacity and rebuild this community. You got to put money out. Why do you think they're doing these extensions, these stimulus things? So that was the idea. Try to get the people, DDA, PDA, EDC, and the other authorities to borrow the money. Now, the hope is that when the new president comes in there, he will reauthorize this program, and we'll all be ready to jump. So that's why there still is a good chance, because the way it's written in the legend, the program is supposed to be alive until the money runs out. I'm talking about the $600 billion that's in the program that's a part of your package.
Mm-hmm.
So if they reauthorize and put some additional money, these opportunities are gonna multiply exponentially for us.
Mr. Mayor, if I could get the city manager in on this, because, at the beginning of the pandemic, when we started talking about this federal money, you had specifically asked me to keep my eye on these federal things, because I had gotten that email, if you remember, coming from the current administration, that this money was going to be coming down. Madam City Manager, do we have someone who's tasked with watching these federal funds and looking for any opportunities? Because I remember in that instance, there seemed not to be, at that time, someone who was watching, and I only found out about it because, I saw the emails and was actually on the call. Actually, one of the calls was with the president, but it did outline when this money was coming, what we needed to do to get it. But I just worried that, as Mr. Wright says, that, if we don't have anybody looking for that, I don't know if that's somebody on the staff, somebody on these boards, Attica or Downtown Authority, who should be doing that, and how can we make sure that's not a missed opportunity?
We are pretty much all looking at everything that comes out. The local banks have also been instrumental. They are, a lot of these funds are flowing through the local banks. However, I think the predominant interest has been in the PPP because it's a forgivable loan. The challenge with one of our authorities with borrowing a lot of money and then expecting to have a payment in 2 years is several local businesses had the PPP, which is a forgivable loan. So, I'm not saying that we catch every and all federal opportunities that come out, but we've been generally very successful And we do review the information that comes out and try to make sure that our partners are also pushing that information out to clients and to people in the community.
Okay, so that means that the information that Mr. Wright is talking about should be available through, I guess, Community Economic Development, should it be available through Attica? Who's going to be specifically responsible for that?
I can't answer that because I don't know specifically every single program that comes out. We certainly are tracking the legislation that comes out and looking for opportunities. We get notified by several different entities, and we do push that information out as best we can. But like I said, the authorities that we work with, you know, there isn't a desire or a business model in place to borrow $10 million from the federal government and then issue it. We do have loans that flow through the we've had some challenges. The city has had to pay off some of those loans because of default. So, you know, we are pretty aggressive with looking at what is available and what's most suitable for our community.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I just close my comments as I think that, you know, this is the perfect time to, you know, we did a task force concerning all our other topics. We should also do a task force concerning these types of opportunities, especially for our small and minority businesses here in Albany, and try to reestablish our minority procurement office and you know, take advantage of these opportunities if they are available. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Obviously, Mr. Wright, I don't understand the specifics of the program. I don't know who can be a lender. You mentioned the Payroll Development Authority, Attica, Downtown Development Authority. Could ACT be a lender? I mean, if what you're telling me, if this program is, you're guaranteed a 95%, I mean, basically that's what the government's doing,
Right.
is guaranteeing the loan up to 95%, correct?
Right, correct.
So the city's exposure for default, maximum exposure for default would be 5%.
5%.
Yes, sir, if that's correct.
That is correct.
Okay. Could ACT be the lender? Or,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, ACT is already a lender.
Through this program?
We are-
Through the Main Street program?
I know they're in the SBA program, and I believe that this was one of the streams. So
Okay.
they're already very active and participating. As a
Can
matter
we
of
find-
fact, I think you
Can we find out how much money?
support of that. And yes, we can find out.
Okay. And how many applications have been made and how many loans have been extended? We can find that out as well, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Wright.
No, I was just going to say that the whole idea was to put America back to work with these two programs. And what better way to do it than that, because they realize that $15 an hour is coming. So that means going to be more taxes coming in there. And the other thing that you may not be aware of, but what President Trump did back in 2017, he restructured the tax system. And of course, he gave everybody who made $1 million a year or more a 50% tax break. He did that by restructuring the tax system. And what he did, he set up 4 silos. So if you didn't have a $10,000 deductible for property taxes and interest, you defaulted to a silo. And everything, if you were single, you was in one silo, and everything above $12,000 was taxable at 12%. If you were head of household, you got an $18,000 deductible, and everything above $18,000 at 12%. And then if you were a married couple, everything above $24,000 was taxable at 12%. So he just set up silos. If you didn't have deductible of $10,000, but with this program is designed to mitigate or offset that, because as more and more money come in there, particularly Medicare and the payroll tax, it generates income throughout the economy and create jobs. The whole idea is to create jobs. What better way than the small business by the Board of Governors Federal Reserve System was a business that had at least 10, you had to have at least 10 employees, but a maximum of 15,000. Those are the only ones that are eligible to participate in this program. So minimum 10, maximum of 15,000. And those are the ones who are going to generate most of the jobs. So that's why it was designed to have low interest. Can you imagine someone buying 95% of your note for up to $50 million and give you 5 years to pay it back? Your first payment is not due for 2 years, and then give you a balloon note if you're not ready at the end of 5 years, and then pay $1,200 to the bank for facilitating the loan. So it just sort of the best of any world we can imagine to have that. The idea about the 95% buying the note was to prevent, the three banks in our area was Synovus, Bank of America, and SunTrust. Prevent them from saying no, Mayor. That's how why they did the 95%. So it's better than a guarantee. They actually buy the note through a holding company called the SPV, and that's in your details of the handout.
Well, we appreciate, Mr. Wright. Obviously, we should know about this program, and we need to access these funds. I understand when I was sitting in on these conferences, these National Conference of Mayors, there were discussions about businesses, disadvantaged businesses being underfunded and that we're not going to have access to these funds, and the survival and success of those businesses actually had challenges, obviously, during the last year, and we appreciate this, and I will assure you that we're going to investigate it, and we will keep you apprised of what's going on, but I'm sure you'll monitor that and be back with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
could I ask Mr. Wright just one question?
Yes, sir.
For clarification?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wright, you mentioned in your presentation, did you mean Sherwood Church or Sherwood School?
The church.
So they received some money through the payroll?
It's
$5 million. It's in your packet. I got it.
up to $5.
Up to $5 million.
Yeah.
There's
That's
category.
a lot of employees, though. I don't see that.
It's on 76. Excuse me, Mr. Wright. It's on 76 and 77.
Yeah, it's in there.
Next, we have update on appointments. I think that's for information. Is that right, Mr. Hicks?
That's correct.
If I would, if you want to go through those to let everybody know.
Yes, sir. Number one is a municipal court appointment. That's pending recommendation from the municipal court task force. Number two is 2 appointments to the aviation commission, and that's commission and the mayor. Number 3 is 1 commissioner appointment to the pension board. Number 4 is the 3 appointments to the Southwest Georgia Regional Commission. Number 5 is the mayor and Ward 2 appointments to the tree board. Number 6 is the mayor appointment to the Joint Board of Adjustments and Appeals. Number 7 is 3 appointments to Attica. Number 8 is Community Economic Development Council appointments. Number 9 is Keep Our Daughter Beautiful for 4 appointments. Number 10 is 3 appointments to the Planning Commission. Number 11 is 2 appointments to the Albany Utility Board. And number 12 is the Mayor Pro Tem for 2021 appointment.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about those appointments? Mayor Pro Tem.
No question.
Commissioner Fuller.
No, sir.
Commissioner Fletcher.
No questions.
Commissioner Worthington.
No question.
Commissioner Langstaff.
No question.
Commissioner Young.
Yeah, I did have a question, I guess, about the handout that was passed out earlier. I guess in terms of the demographics or
I think that actually came from Mr. Davis's office.
Mr. Davis, did you want to speak on that handout?
Can we talk about that under, I'll make a note under other business?
Okay, that wasn't about appointments though?
What, okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Davis, you sent this notice out, there's some legislation has, I guess it's been passed, right?
No, sir, that's just, the bill was dropped in the hopper and will come up through the process, but I just wanted you all to know that.
Okay, all right, so that's not gonna apply to these appointments, Commissioner Young, but I had some questions about that myself. So, can we put that under other business?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
No questions then.
thank you. Next item on the agenda, alcohol license ordinance updates, proposed changes to the alcohol license. Mr. Davis, are you speaking to that?
Sure, yes, sir. There are 3 proposals, new ordinances for the alcohol code. The first of these deals with closing hours for bars, I'll call it, premises, on premises consumption. You'll see that presently, page 82, that the premises may remain open till 4 a.m. and then have to be cleared, and then can even have 4 employees stay an hour later for the purpose of cleaning the premises. And the proposal at the bottom in the red would eliminate those provisions, except for there would be 2:45 cease sales, and then clearing the premises by 3:15 a.m. This has been discussed at the Public Safety Committee meetings, and Chief Persley was there, and I understand is in favor of no longer having the 4 a.m. nor the 5 a.m. provisions to stay in effect. And I think that's also the other members of the Public Safety Committee. Do you want me to go through them all, or just stop now for any
Okay,
questions?
we can have questions. Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. Okay, approach him. Any questions for Mr. Davis?
Mr. Davis, this would be the marshal office or the police department will notify.
Yes, I assume Nathaniel Norman's office would make all of them aware of this.
So as we vote on the next Tuesday night, it will go into effect that same night, right?
As soon as it's signed, yes, sir.
That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Fuller?
Yes, sir. Nathan, just so I understand correctly, is that, so this is saying that the business will close and everyone out, including employees, will be 2:55 a.m.?
They would cease sales at 2:45, and the premises would be cleared at 3:15.
Okay, and that's including any workers, anybody, employees as well?
Yes, sir, that's exactly right. Thanks for asking.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Warburton?
No questions. I just appreciate Mr. Davis putting this together. This was discussed multiple times at our Public Safety Committee, and we kind of formalized it last meeting. So this is certainly has been discussed and talked about at our meeting multiple times. So I appreciate the folks that serve on the committee and kind of vetting this. So we're excited to put these in front of the commission at large, not just this one, but the other ones as well.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
No questions, but thank you, Mr. Davis, for your hard work on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had three concerns. First, it starts talking about the hours of 8 a.m. I think there's a state law that says you can't sell alcoholic beverages before 12 noon. Isn't that correct, Mr. Davis?
Yes, sir.
So we need to look at that because that would be this provision will be inconsistent with the state law. Secondly, I think 30 minutes is not sufficient time to clean out the bars. I remember years ago when we extended it. I'd really like to see what the hours used to be. I was on the commission when we extended it to 4 o'clock in the morning. But I'd like to know what the hours were previously. And there again, I do remember this whole issue about how long it takes people to get out. They call the bar backs, you know, restocking and everything. And that leads me to my third issue, that we really need to hear, before we vote on this next week, we need to give the people who own and operate nightclubs an opportunity to speak to this. If there are compelling reasons to reduce the hours of operation, I certainly would be supportive of moving it back from 4, but I think this, and also we're going to talk about the sign ordinance later, I think we need to have, afford the stakeholders an opportunity to address this, and for that reason, I don't think we need to vote on this next Tuesday.
All right, Mayor, thank you. The present hours are shown in the second.
No, I understand, Mr. Davis, but I mean, I was on the commission before. If I recall correctly, and we're talking about 20 years ago, it used to be that on Saturday night, everything had to be closed at 12 o'clock.
Oh, so I'll research that. I understand.
Yes, sir. And then I think that other nightclubs had to close at 2 during the week or something like that. But I'd like to know what those hours were.
So you're looking for what was in effect prior to?
Yes, sir.
What's in the second preamble? Okay, thank you.
Okay. But that's what I would have. I mean, I really think we need to have a public hearing on this as well as the sign ordinance we're going to talk about later. But with that, the next item.
Yes, sir. Ordinance number 2, page 84 of the agenda package, is an attempt to lay out a new process for denial hearings. It has certain time constraints in it. Hopefully it'll run smooth. If there is a denial, then within 5 business days, our office would supply the applicant with a notice, and then the applicant can make a request for a hearing. The hearing would be set. And the second paragraph says it doesn't have to be at a regular or official meeting. Whatever notice or the notice would contain. I would try to meet with y'all or discuss with y'all when you wanted to do this, and there's 30 days in which to set the hearing, so that should give enough time to come to a time and a date. And then goes on to provide, of course, that 4 members not only constitute a quorum, but any action by this board, of course, takes 4 votes. And then the applicant, and this is all to comply with due process. The alcohol licenses don't carry a property interest, but state law and does require a due process concerning how the license applications are handled. And due process means 2 things. Number 1, notice, and number 2, an opportunity to be heard in a simplistic fashion. Even a traffic citation must meet those requirements. It has in the body of the citation what the alleged offense was, and sets a hearing at the municipal court. So this is the same procedure, and just detailed out, telling the applicant they can bring witnesses, of course, and that's it. Thank you.
Any questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
No question.
Commissioner Fuller?
No question.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No question.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yes, Mayor, and this question may be directed towards you, but in consideration of this ordinance, one thing we'll need to decide as a body is we have to always provide a written statement as to why denial. And so the question for us to consider is, do we want every time we vote no, state the reason why, or will we put that responsibility on you as the chairman to summarize what you feel like would be the reason why? And so that's something that doesn't necessarily have to be in the ordinance, but anytime we vote to deny, we need to come away from the vote with the reason why, that therefore Attorney Davis can, within 5 days, give the reason why. And so that may be a change the way we've handled our votes in the past, is to always be clear on the reason for denial. That's it.
Well, I certainly think, if an applicant applies for a license, they have a right not only to, they have a right, I think, to an explanation, but it could be that different commissioners have different reasons for denying it. And so I guess we ought to talk to the city attorney about that. How would we work through that, Mr. Davis? The one thing is, if a member of the board votes against every alcohol application, well, then that is that commissioner's position. Someone might be concerned about the impact a particular location would have on nearby residences, and then another commissioner might feel we already have too many alcohol establishments in that area. So probably more often than not, you'd have a denial where the 4 or more members who voted against the application would not be of the same mind as to the reason.
Yes, I think a memo I sent out, and I'll resend it, about this earlier, was a suggestion that you and your colleagues state the reasons for denial into the record, and of course we would have Nathaniel Norman's office's report also to rely on, and then the presentation made by that office. Because we do owe them, and thanks for pointing it out, a short, concise statement of the reasons for the denial. Yes, sir.
Well, that doesn't answer your question, Commissioner Warmington, but
Yeah, Mayor, I would just suggest that maybe the strategy would be, if there's 4 votes to deny or 7 votes to deny, then you have 4 reasons. 3 of the 4 might be the same, but you're right. If you had 7 votes to deny, you could have 7 different reasons, and if that's the strategy, then we would just provide the applicant with, here are 7 stated reasons that we voted to deny, or if they were only 4, here's the 4 reasons. It's just we would need to state that in a public setting so we have a public record of the reason. So that's why I'm saying it may not be part of this ordinance. That's just where we'll have to have a internal way of dealing with that, so we can always provide a written statement. But, what we don't want to do is vote no and move on to the next business, and then Mr. Davis is wondering, well, what reason do we give the applicant? We need to state the reason before we move to the next agenda item in that particular meeting.
One suggestion I would have, if the city attorney, the day, within 48 hours of the meeting, could just send out an email to the members of the commission and said, these are the reasons that were identified. Are there any other reasons, or is there any inaccuracy before it goes to the applicant?
Be glad to. Can I? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. That way everybody would have an opportunity to say, well, no, that's not. Okay. Is that fair enough?
That's it.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. One of the things that came up during our meeting was, the fact that we were, trying to achieve a method of due process for the applicant. But what I'm always concerned with is making sure that the rights of the community are also taken into consideration. And I think what we said was that we want to try to have a commitment of having these alcohol licenses be placed on the agenda at a consistent time during our meetings. Maybe, I think it was the third, I want to say, do you remember what it was, Q? When we recorded, I think it might have been the third work session. Yeah, the third work session of the month, right before a vote, so the community can have some, you know, consistency as to when those things were going to come up. Because if you remember, you know, the whole issue and controversy was created when I felt that the community didn't get enough notice, you know, maybe because of COVID and, you know, us changing our meeting style to have this issue come up and could not speak to it. So that will always be my consideration, is to make sure we're doing whatever we can to keep the community informed. I think the signs themselves are a excellent idea for my part in it. I like the way they're designed, and I think it goes to, again, to make sure we're informing the public of what's being brought to their neighborhood, and we should always err on that side of the coin. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. And the third amendment, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, sir. This is an effort to provide more notice than is presently provided in response to an alcohol application. This requires that there be there always has been a requirement of a notice in the paper, but the provision that's before you now would require that notice not be in the classified ad section. So there would be an additional cost, but it just, I always feels like it would attract attention better if it was not buried in with the classified ads. Also, in the second subsection B, there's a sign requirement similar to what takes place now in zoning, and then also would be an additional item for providing a notice to the public. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions on this issue?
No question on it.
Commissioner Fuller.
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher.
No questions.
Commissioner Warmington.
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff.
No questions.
Commissioner Young.
No questions.
I think this is an improvement. It'll assure that residents have notice when there is an application for an alcohol license at any given location. But before we go forward, what is the will of the commission? I really think this issue of changing the hours, we need to have a public hearing on before we vote on this at next Tuesday's meeting. If I could just ask if you're ready to move forward, or if you would support having a public hearing and allowing people who own and operate alcohol establishments where alcoholic beverages, about the hours of operation. What is your position, Mayor Pro Tem?
I think that we should have a public hearing, and I do believe in due process and to be transparent with the establishment.
Okay. Commissioner Fuller?
Yes, sir, I'd like to see a public hearing as well. I think that they should have an opportunity to speak.
Commissioner Fletcher?
I agree. If it affects the businesses, they need to be able to speak, so I would support a public hearing. Thank you.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, the good thing is we've got mailing addresses through the business license of everybody. I would suggest we draft a letter and really all three of these we ought to mail to every license owner to say, here are the three things we're contemplating changes and whatever public hearing date you have set. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Well, the difference as I see it would be the second and third really have to do with the application process. And the first one is going, which wouldn't, but yeah, that's fine. We can include that as well. Commissioner Langstaff?
I'm in favor of it.
Okay, Commissioner Young?
I concur.
Okay, well then can we, Ms. Subadan, can we continue this? I mean, well, not continue it, but not put it on the regular meeting agenda, but we'll have a public hearing. It'd probably be better to do it one day outside of a work session, but we can talk about that. Can we do that, Ms. Subadan?
Yes, yes, sir, and, once you decide on the dates, we'll do a mass mailing to everybody who has an alcohol license.
Okay, okay, perfect. Okay. The next item is for information, qualifying fee. Mr. Hicks, could you tell us about this?
Every year, election come around, the qualifying fees have to be voted on and published before February 1st.
Okay. Mr. Davis, I assume that's a statutory requirement?
Yes, sir.
And the qualifying fee is also a percentage of whatever the salary is that right?
Yes, I believe it's 3%. I'm not sure the
Okay.
number. Yeah.
Any questions?
You want me
Mayor
to
Pro
double
Tem?
check that?
Sir?
You want me to double check the percentage number?
Well, I guess it's going to be in the notice, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, I was just, for my, Mayor Pro Tem, any questions, Ms. Davis, about?
Mr. Davis, you wouldn't by any chance have the fee, would you, right? I know it's 3%, but that would be for a city commissioner to qualify.
I don't have them with me. I run upstairs and.
No, after the meeting, you can give it to me.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner Fuller?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No question.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
Thank you. Next, it looks like we have an update from the independent agencies. I see Ms. Beasley's here and Mr. Gregors is here. Anybody else from one of the independent agencies? Okay. So, Ms. Beasley, Ms. Gregors, you going to speak to us today?
No, I was here in support of the CBB.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hope y'all are doing well this morning. Looking back on 2020, it was not the best year, but we learned to act fast, collaborate with our partners, and reimagine promoting Albany to keep our momentum going. There we go. The CVB is now a standalone 501c6 organization. We have 11 board members made up of professionals within the hospitality industry. The city has 2 positions appointed by the mayor from among qualified candidates received and recommended by the board. City manager and county administrator are voting ex officio members, or ex officio, sorry. The chamber board has 1 appointed position. All other board vacancies are filled by nominations from the board or community members, but these categories must be maintained within the vacancies, 1 from sports marketing, 3 from hospitality, and 2 at large. You can see the list of our current board members at this time. Tommy Gregors is our chairman. Joel Holmes, vice chair. Sharon Subadan is our treasurer at this time, and our other board members. The CVB's portion of the hotel motel tax money must be used to promote tourism, conventions, trade shows, and tourism product development. Through these promotions, we work to increase hotel motel tax and economic growth in Albany. To give you an update, with the second relief that came out, we still do not qualify for any of the PPP loan or the relief because we receive a flat amount of $800,000 annually from the hotel motel tax. Therefore, we cannot show a 25% decrease in revenue during the pandemic. So that's something just to keep in mind as we move through. Several of our attractions are funded through the hotel motel tax. We receive financials and documentations on how these funds are spent to stay in compliance with state and DCA requirements. Also, because we collect 8% hotel motel tax within the city of Albany, 1% must be spent on tourism product development. Wayfinding signage, as you're probably aware, is way overdue for Albany and was really needed about 20 years ago as we were increasing the attractions and the tourism within Albany. The CVB had started setting money aside for wayfinding in 2005. When Ms. Sudan joined the CVB board, she and the board members decided we should make wayfinding signage a priority. The project was funded in 2019. The news by the numbers for 2020. These won't be the numbers we are used to celebrating with a huge increase year over year. As of December, our hotel occupancy is 57% for 2020. This is down 19%. Georgia's occupancy is down 39%. Some of our counterparts in Georgia were seeing an occupancy of 25% and have struggled to get back up to 48%. ADR is down 10% compared to the loss of Georgia's 28% as a whole. You can see RevPAR is down 27% versus Georgia's 55% down.
What is ADR and RevPAR?
ADR is average daily rate. RevPAR is revenue per available room. You can see we are at a 27% decrease, which closely will mirror our drop in hotel motel tax as well, as that is the number that most of the hotels go by and the revenue to show their overall growth or decrease within and just the progress of their hotel. That is the most important number that they use. We are fortunate none of our hotels suspended service. While across the state, some of the cities within Georgia were seeing 10 to 70 properties suspending service within one city. The impact of the shutdown you can see here. The occupancy trends were going up we went down from Albany, but as you can see through the state and national trends, we were holding occupancy within the 50% range, while our friends in Columbus, LaGrange, and Atlanta were struggling to get near for 50%. As you can see, the huge drop in April, which was the biggest time of the shutdown, they all dropped close to 28%, and we only dropped to 51%. To give you a point of reference, 2019, our RevPAR on average was $62.99. As you can see, we averaged between 43 to 39 to back up to 44.50. But you'll notice in April, some of our partners in Georgia and Atlanta and Columbus dropped down to $18.07. That's a dramatic loss for them, of course.
Ms. Beasley, did we change the screen? Am I missing something?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Again, you're explaining that?
Yes, so you'll see here that 43.43 was RevPAR, whereas it dropped down for our partners within the state down to 40, where we dropped just a little bit to 39.05. The rest of the state and Atlanta and Columbus and the U.S. dropped to around $18. They were able to climb back up as we were, and then we topped out in June at 44.50, and then they topped out at 36. COVID-19 impacted our annual events last year dramatically. Conservatively, our total economic impact loss was $6 million, or just over $6 million. These are the large events our community missed due to the COVID shutdown. While this money is a loss, we are happy to say that 90% of all events have rescheduled to this year if they are able to happen safely. You can see in here 61 events, meetings, and reunions were impacted. Albany has a strong reunion, class reunion, family reunion base within the summertime that carries us through. Thankfully, we do have those rescheduled. The CVB leases the Albany Welcome Center for $20 per year from Daugherty County. The Welcome Center opened in August of 2008 after the Bridge House was renovated. Our Welcome Center was closed to the public March 17th through June 15th. Full-time staff returned to the office in May. We opened to the public with modified hours, Monday through Friday from 10 to 4 until November, when we finally were able to and felt safe enough to open in November on Saturdays from 10 to 4. We normally see an average of 15,000 visitors come through the Welcome Center annually. As you can see here, our visitor sign-in was 3,000 for last year. Our out-of-state sign-in was up by 5%. So we did have people coming through the state and staying in Albany to visit. We had several people who were honestly just out driving around, trying to get out of the house. We also, as you see, did have a strong request for relocation packets and a strong request for information. Relocation packets were at 75, and requests for information were at 840. That request for information is on having meetings, groups come in here, as well as leisure travelers. Here you'll see, unlike some of our counterparts, we continued our digital media, our digital marketing. We just took a different approach. We knew that it was not safe to obviously invite people to come to Albany and to travel here, which is what our normal approach is. Instead, we took the opportunity to create blogs that promoted our local restaurants who were doing curbside service, as well as local boutiques who were doing curbside service. Several were doing live Facebook promotions and offering the opportunity for them to purchase and pick up at the store. We developed a weekly contest using each of our attractions, which lasted 6 weeks. We offered visitors and locals the opportunity to post their favorite memory and photo of that week's highlighted attraction. On Fridays, we chose a winner, and they received a $25 gift card to any local restaurant or boutique. With this and other engaging posts, we were able to stay ahead of the digital world, increasing social and digital marketing by 13%. We increased our paid search and display advertising by 100%. Radium Springs and outdoor activities were the most popular searched and website traffic that we had, which would be obvious during that time. We were unable to host our scheduled press trip with 7 travel writers. Instead, we had to pitch stories to all of the national and local media. We were successful with over $2.3 million in estimated media value. Articles from the USA Today, AJC, WSB-TV Atlanta included outdoor activities, inexpensive attractions, our civil rights, and family adventures. Not only national news publications, but also travel bloggers with over 1 million followers. This is an increase of over $400,000 from 2019. When COVID-19 hit, the CVB team again pivoted. The CVB partnered with Phoebe to be the liaison for the travel medical staff, coming in and helping the hoteliers, working with the medical staff to find housing. Our community was not set up for the influx of medical staff arriving needing extended stay. We don't have a large inventory of Airbnb and VRBO like some of our other cities. We learned very quickly how the nurses have a very low rate per diem of $63, and they are responsible for finding their own housing. We quickly reached out to our hotel properties, explained the situation. We knew that some of them, upwards of $72 per room, was their break even to keep staff and to keep the hotel open. But they worked with us and they worked with the traveling nurses. We got major rate reductions. They were offering laundry service to our nurses and tried to keep the floors designated between night shift and day shift to keep the traffic and the noise down per floor. We were able to get this list over to Phoebe and updated on a regular basis, as well as some of the traveling nurses who had reached out to us that were sharing the same information. As our hotels continued to update, we continued to update that information and make sure it got pushed out. The CVB partnered then with local businesses and attractions to assemble over 200 thank you bags for our hotels to hand out as medical staff checked in. Each bag included ABY swag, annual passes to the attractions. Obviously, they couldn't visit right at that moment, so we wanted to make sure that when the time came, they were able to bring their family back and enjoy Albany in the right way. The bags also included coupons to local restaurants. We learned how to partner through the pandemic. Partnerships were important during this time. Our first plan of action was to develop the blog of restaurants and local shops. And then our second plan of action was to meet with all of our attractions and partners to have our first Zoom call of what are we going to do. The ideas started flowing and production started happening the next day. Live Facebook videos with a simple animal encounter, story time, crafts, concerts, and art lessons, just to name a few. In the top right-hand corner, you can see Miss Rutha Harris, 2 nurses, and myself singing This Little Light of Mine as part of the Georgia Peach Pickers event, which usually takes place at the Ryman in Nashville. It was an online concert that they reached out to us and wanted to give the opportunity for light to be shed on Albany and the struggles that we were going through during that time. As we moved closer to businesses opening back up, the CVB was asked to lead a meeting with local restaurant owners. Over a 3-week period, with the help of the health department, law enforcement, the executive order, and expectations for their operations were explained. The challenge would be getting staff trained on these new mandates. The levy answered the cry for help. They developed a COVID-19 restaurant training video that included a test to make sure that the employees understood what their responsibilities were. The CVB, City of Albany, and Daugherty County partnered to pay for the program and offer to the restaurants as they were already suffering with revenue. We had over 600 register for the class and 18 food establishments whose entire staff completed the course. We learned a valuable lesson, which is also being learned within our school systems. A large portion of our community doesn't have access to internet. And a lot of them do not have a large amount of data access on their phones as well. We had to do face-to-face classes for 7 restaurants. The program was a success. We were even asked to present the program at the GACVB and Southeast Tourism Society monthly meeting. We also worked with attractions to help promote and implement their safety plans. All of our hotels were offering guaranteed stay packages for each guest as they checked in, which included a mask, sanitary wipes, and hand sanitizer. As we move forward with continuing to open Albany for business, people were starting to come back out of their houses. They were wanting to enjoy life again. We developed weekend packages for staycations or vacations. Starting in September, each weekend stay received a Fall in Love with ABY gift bag. It included 4 free tickets to each attraction for a family up to 4, coupons to local restaurants, retail stores, and bakeries. We distributed over 280 bags to the hotels from September to December. The CVB did reimburse the attractions for each pass used to help them retain a revenue stream. We did not ask for them to do it for free, as we knew that they needed revenue stream as well. One of the projects that the CVB started working on in 2019, or at the end of 2019, was a research project that was very lengthy. We were projected to finish this by June 2020. You can see the graphic shows what people are saying about us thus far. Friendly people, nice people, clean downtown, nice hotels, just to name a few. Our research is 75% complete. The large portion of the project is the visitor profile study. They like to have upwards of 250 intercept interviews done. These interviews are done in our peak times of summer and spring. The pandemic changed the in-person interviews to a digital survey. We worked with the hotel staff to be able to have their front desk hand out the surveys with a special code for each staff member, so that if each staff member, every time they got 50 surveys under their name, they received $50. So it was an incentive for them to help us get the surveys done as well. We hope to have these completed within the next couple of months. As you can imagine, digital surveys take a little longer than in person. Thus far, the primary traveler, as you can see in the graph above, leisure travel is now leading the pace, followed by business, group meetings, and sports. This research is being done in unprecedented times, but honestly, we haven't had a typical tourism year since 2016. Tornadoes in 2017, hurricanes in 2018 and 19, and a pandemic in 2020. The lodging study, attraction survey, and meeting planner study will be hard data we can use to improve the visitor's experience. Even with the unprecedented events over the past several years, we feel the data will give us what we need to put together a strong strategic marketing plan. One challenge we know will be an issue is safety. Our hotels have had a large amount of car break-ins and even cars stolen. They are working on tighter security measures and even hiring off-duty officers to help at night. We look for this to be completed by June, if not sooner. The most exciting project is the wayfinding signage project. We are contracting with Sky Design to install a new wayfinding signage program. Sky Design specializes in wayfinding projects such as those that can be found in Canton, Norcross, Chamblee, Georgia Tech, Lawrenceville, just to name a few. Sky Design handles all of the DOT permitting, the right-of-way, and installment of the signs. Our engineering, planning, development, and downtown manager's office has been involved with the project and reviewed the plans. Our first step is the primary and secondary monuments. Based on recommendations by Sky Design Team, phase 1 of the two-phase project is update current monument signs plus add 2 additional monument signs at US 19 and P&G. And 4 secondary meaning that they will be about half the size of the primary. 4 secondary monuments that will be at Moultrie Road and 19, Business 82 and Pinson Road, Jefferson and 19, Westover and Gilliamville. The next will be vehicle directional signage. This is the largest portion of this project with 52 signs. They'll be placed throughout the city, directing visitors to 24 points of interest, including attractions, Flint River Entertainment Complex facilities, ASU East and West, local government buildings, and federal courthouse. We are able to expand and add locations as new businesses come and points of interest change. Phase 1 bids are due to us by the end of today. Then the implementation will start immediately. You may see a fabricated sign in the coming weeks to test color and reflective lettering. Sky Design recommended 2 phases as the first phase is rather large, so the second phase will focus on downtown information kiosk, pedestrian directional signage, and parking. This phase will start as soon as we start implementing the first. And you can see those are some examples of what it would look like. Oh, there's a slide missing. To give you an update on the Stickers Marathon. In December, when the COVID numbers started getting higher, we had a conversation with Dr. Charles Ruiz and Scott Steiner to discuss the viability of hosting a marathon in March. They recommended a postponement to the middle of April. Phoebe is a sponsor and Wilson Hospice House is a benefactor, so we took their recommendation and postponed to April 17th, 2020. We are prepared to have a virtual race, but because this race was developed to bring visitors to town and create economic growth, we wanted to give it a chance to be viable. The Marathon Board has tiered safety plans for both race packet pickup on Friday and race day on Saturday. We will cap the race at 650 runners per race for a total of 1,300. We are almost at 750 for the event now, and that's a cumulative number of both races. Runners can defer to 2022 or 2023 if the date in April is not convenient. We hope to have a live race, but we will revisit the viability of the April date with Dr. Ruiz and Mr. Steiner at the end of this month or the 1st of February. We will then make, of course, the final decision. As you see on your screen, our primary focus has always been to bring visitors to town, increase hotel-motel tax, and create economic growth. We need to do something about the negativity the pandemic is having on our community. We decided a positive grassroots campaign was needed. This is outside our purview, but we do feel that if we have a positive community, it creates a positive experience for our visitors. Visitors talk about how they love the people here. Everyone is so nice and it is so beautiful here. We live in the South where when a baby is born, someone is sick, someone passes, we show up in the masses to love, comfort, and celebrate. We love to socialize and congregate. We welcome strangers and people we know with a hug or a handshake. Naturally, love was the common denominator we discussed. Acronyms and airport codes are now used to identify cities. ABY was another opportunity for us to promote our airport. I Love ABY was born. We worked with the levy to bring it to life. We used pictures from our attractions contest, user-generated content, and our own professional photos. We used social media, digital marketing, billboards, radio, and television. Unfortunately, the political ads took most of the media buys from July until now. We will go back to the local media buys in the coming weeks. We hope each of you will help us to promote I Love ABY in your wards. With the hopes of the vaccine decreasing the number of cases in the community in the coming months, we would also like to partner with each of you to create a mini community day in each of your wards. Our hope is the community will see we live the good life in Albany, Georgia. If our community is proud, it makes our job easier to recruit visitors, events, groups, and meetings to Albany. We hope you'll jump on board with hashtag I Love ABY. I know all of this was a lot of information. Please know my door is always open for any of you to come. Most of you have my cell phone number, and you are always welcome to use that as well. And now, any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Beasley. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions for Ms. Beasley?
No question, but thanks, Ms. Beasley, for that presentation. Let me ask one question. You put up that from visitors and Albany State Homecoming, what was, can you tell me the amount of revenue that Albany State generate that week of homecoming?
It is typically around $3 million.
3 million, okay.
Yes, sir.
So the rest of them from, as you said, the SIC Volleyball, Jehovah's Witness, Albany State Homecoming, and 6-1 event. So the rest was what, combination about 3 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you also elaborate that some upcoming events like the Snicker Marathon that you are going to get with, well, as this virus continue, that y'all probably make a decision sometime next month about the Snickers Marathon?
Yes, we want to make sure that we give runners the opportunity, as we do have a lot who fly in, rent cars, they have hotel rooms. We want to make sure that we give them ample opportunity to plan and rearrange.
Okay.
There's no way for us to have it after April. After April, events with the baseball, softball start on April 28th. And then we literally move into every single weekend being booked right now up through June.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's it, ma'am.
Mr. Fuller?
No questions, just a comment. I know 2020 was difficult all the way around, but great job on pivoting like you did and keeping those year-over-year losses as low as you did. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher?
Thank you, Michelle, for all your hard work. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Warmington?
Same sentiment here. Thank you so much, Ms. Beasley. Great presentation. One question I did have, back to the PA Rev PAR, how would you explain how we were such a drastic difference from our partners or other friends in the state?
Because with the influx of traveling nurses we had coming in, even using Albany State dorms, the residency dorms at Phoebe, we still had to have somewhere for the nurses to stay. It was not enough. A lot of our counterparts have the Airbnb and the VRBO, but we do not have a large inventory of that. So our only options were the hotels, which is why we had to work strongly with them to reduce rate and to offer some amenities that they're not used to offering. So whereas the pandemic suffered through our community, It also helps sustain jobs at the same time within our tourism industry as it relates to the hotels. Some of our hotels did shut down floors, some at least one floor. And so that's why. And, you know, one thing to keep in mind as we move forward with the hotel motel tax, Airbnb and VRBO are not mandated to pay hotel motel tax or accommodation tax. And if we do increase in the inventory for Airbnb and VRBO, that is something that we would want to look at in the form of an ordinance to make sure that we are also getting that tax money.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
No questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beasley, and commend you on the CVB on the good work, particularly assisting businesses in modifying their operations to stay in business during these challenging times.
And thank you for your support as well, all of you.
Next, we have an update on the various activities of the various task force. Ms. Subadan, will you be?
Good morning. I'm going to actually ask Augustus Tutu to run through the presentation, and if you need, I'll be on for any questions.
Okay,
Good
Mr.
morning,
Tutu,
Mr.
you
Mayor.
have the floor.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, and City Manager. I'm Augustus Tutu, your Acting Director of Code Enforcement, but today I'm representing the City Manager's office in my previous role. Today's brief is an update to the Commission Task Force. In mid-September 2020, the Commission attended a retreat to identify city major problem areas, prioritize them, and provide a mitigation strategy through a task-based methodology. Next slide. Displayed on this slide is the proposed strategic objective with focus on the bolden areas, which will be addressed later in the brief. The Commission Task Force lines of effort, 1 through 6, informs us of the task force number and title, the assigned leadership associated, and the respective staff support leads. Today, I'll orient the Commission to the slides, provide each task force quick wins, and provide an overall task status. Next slide. I'd like to orient you to the slide on what has been identified as the Chiclet chart. In the upper left and right of the tri-chart are the objectives and problem statements derived from the mid-September 2020 retreat minutes. Mitigating actions are the tools to meet the objective and solve the problem statement. Status provides us an update on the task, and currently all 6 task forces agreed to a 60-day extension, most ending on the 29th of January. Some of the quick wins I'd like to highlight on the Public Safety Commission Task Force, which is a slide that is presently before you. If you go to slide 3, yes, thank you. Are the license plate readers currently at a 90% completed? The gunshot detection RFP has been published, and your current drones are operational. I'll pause for any questions, sir, or unless you want me to continue through the entire slide deck and come back for questions.
I think, how would we like to do it? I think we ought to go ahead. What do you? Okay. Anybody take issue with that?
We'll run through it then, sir.
Okay.
Next slide. This is the Municipal Court Commission Task Force. So I said I'll just highlight the quick wins, and if we have any questions at the end of the presentation, we'll come back to it. The municipal court study RFP published, and the bidding is available on the 20th of January, which is tomorrow. There was a decision on the delineation of the city court responsibilities. Temporary hire of clerks, one currently hired, and the court is assessing the need for a second hire. The Justice Department grant has been approved by the commission last month, and the Tile Technologies Executive Tech demonstration was complete. Next slide. Quick win for the Emergency Management Task Force, delineation of responsibilities between the city and the county leadership during crisis management. Currently, that's under review in Mr. Mayor, your office at this time. Going to the Quality of Life Commission Task Force, quick wins on that, where the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program continues to progress with a completion, right now at a completion of 21%. That equates to about 80 completed multifamily homes out of the 388 that are currently scheduled. The Energy Conservation Loan Program, formerly known as the Weatherization Plan, will be in front of the Commission sometime in January for a decision. The Gas Appliance Program, once approved by the Utility Board, could restart as early as February or March. The Call Before You Move program is undergoing a launch plan date on the city's website. And currently, the acting director of code enforcement is currently in place. Next slide. The City Space Planning Task Force, quick one here, is the government rental invoice, which was requested for the past 5 years, has been acquired and will assist also in future analysis. And finally, the Charter and Code Review Task Force, quick one here, is the review of the Charter and codes and ordinances continuing. That'll be the next slide. Thank you. Next slide. Now, this is pretty much a layout. It takes it from our priorities that we've addressed in the slides that were briefed a second ago, or minutes ago, and it just addresses our priorities from 1 to 14. And as you can see in the third column, it addresses what the suspenses are. As I said, I'll come back to those highlighted bullets that were in the proposed strategic objectives. Those highlighted bullets were created 4 bins, and within each bin, we associated priorities that will fall within those bins. And so that's what this slide depicts. Next slide. The last and final slide is the task force status. It shows percentages across the top, percentages across the top of where the tasks are currently, and it addresses all 6 task forces from task force 1 through 6, and it shows that what percentage are they currently in before they meet the 100% of all tasks completed. And where it addresses a yes or no, once it meets 100% or when the commission decides, will be an opportunity to either turn off the task force or continue on the task force, or turn on because the task force is no longer applicable. This concludes today's update brief. I stand by for your guidance.
Thank you, Mr. Tutu. Any questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
No question at this time, Mr. Tutu.
Commissioner Fuller?
No questions. Thank you for your update.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Thank you for your update. No comment.
Commissioner Warmington.
No comment.
Commissioner Langstaff.
No question.
Commissioner Young.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to just kind of make a comment. Thank you, Mr. Tutu and Madam City Manager, for the update. But just, it was a conversation that I had over social media concerning our task force being quote-unquote secret, and I think that was a conversation that Commissioner Warburton also weighed in. So I don't know, maybe we can look at, you know, some ways to push that information out there a little bit more. I can tell people who are watching and who are listening that these task force were not developed to be secret or in any kind of way non-transparent. It was developed for us to work on those specific tasks in kind of a cohesive way and to focus on those issues, you know, directly and with a focus we could bring, a better focus that we could bring to it. And I think they have served us well. But at any time, and I don't know if this was the case around the board with all the task force, I know on the municipal court, we dealt with some personnel issues that may not have allowed public viewing, but for the most part, I think we were in agreement that people from the public could sit in on the meetings, but not necessarily be allowed to speak. But I just wanted to make that clear to the public because that was a concern that was generated.
I just, I want to thank the members of the commission for their service. I think we've accomplished a good bit as documented here. I certainly think we need to continue with the various task force. I can say that with a couple of groups that I serve with, that we sort of suspended operations in December, and it was hard getting everybody together with everything else that was going on, and I think we ought to continue the task force beyond the January 29 deadline. Consider anybody's thoughts in that regard. Mayor Pro Tem?
I agree there's still a little few work we need to iron out.
Commissioner Fuller?
Yes, sir, I'm good with continuing with the task force.
Commissioner Fletcher?
I'm good with it.
Commissioner Warmington?
Sure, I'd say continue.
Commissioner Langstaff?
That's fine.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. I wouldn't mind saying to continue with the caveat that I guess because it's a task force, I thought we were supposed to be accomplishing a specific task and then moving on. So I still would like that format instead of, you know, necessarily just kind of keeping it, but just whatever we're trying to accomplish, it'd be that same directed focus so we can accomplish what we're accomplishing and move on.
I mean, I agree. I think that's understood that these committees have a remit and they're not permanent committees. We discussed the possibility of this public safety being a permanent committee. I think that would be the only exception because with these other issues, they can be addressed. Looking at municipal court, emergency management, we need to get back together on that. We have the proposed revisions to the statute. But with that, I guess if we need to take action, do we, Mr. Davis, to continue the task force for another 60 days? Do we need to take action on that? Or?
I think you got a concurrence from all your colleagues on that.
Is that sufficient?
I think that in the record is sufficient, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Subadan, did you have anything to add?
I just wanted to thank staff. Everybody's been very cooperative, supporting the task force initiatives, and we look forward to continue to support the efforts until we get to conclusion.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item on the agenda is a proposal to amend the sign ordinance. Mr. Forgy? Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. This is a request of the City Commission to consider updating the sign ordinance. The sign ordinance is in need of update for several reasons, one being consideration to increasing the number of multi-message signs allowed in the city. The number is currently capped at 100, and we're at about 95 right now. So for that alone, we need to consider amending the sign ordinance to see if we want to allow more multi-message signs. We can only grant another 5 permits by the ordinance. Other potential revisions include the addition of a variance procedure, which would allow for a review of sign requests that do not meet the regulations because of unique and specific conditions. This would apply to signs that we've seen recently, the multi-message signs near residential areas, where they could be handled by a variance procedure, or they could be, the ordinance could be modified to allow them in other instances. But either way, our ordinance does not have a variance procedure, so it's either yes or no to things, and oftentimes there's people that have a gray area for their request, and a variance would help us satisfy those gray areas. Now, the sign ordinance is not part of the zoning ordinance. It does rely on zoning for where signs are allowed. And because of this reason, administratively, it should be handled like a change to the zoning ordinance, which would then require the City Commission to make the recommendation that the Planning Commission study the ordinance, and then the Planning Commission comes up with a recommended change, and they transmit it back to you all. You have a public hearing, and you give your input for any changes. So this is a request for the City Commission to transmit the signed ordinance for consideration of revisions to the Planning Commission. And there was an amendment, or a draft amendment, that we commissioned from a land use attorney included in your materials. He gave some suggestions on what he thought should be revised. He is the one who wrote the original ordinance for the City of Albany back in, I think, 2000, and he's a well-respected land use attorney who deals with sign ordinances regularly. And those basically, the things I mentioned basically outline his recommended changes.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy. Mayor Pro Tem?
Oh, did you say that we are up to 95, what, these, the billboard sign?
No, sir. These are the multi-message, the lit LED signs that change the text. We're up to 95 of those, and the ordinance caps them at 100.
Okay, so the LEDs, that's like signs at different churches and other things that afternoon?
That's correct.
Before we vote on this next month, is it possible we can get a list of all those and the location?
Sure, we can give you that.
And another follow-up, did I overlook, or did I see anything about campaign sign? How is that be regulated?
Well, we don't, at this point, we don't recommend any changes with how those are regulated. They are just regulated as additional signage on an individual's lot. We don't regulate signs based on the content, so we don't see a campaign sign, we just see a sign. And people are allowed so many signs on their property.
So in other words, you're saying that a campaign sign can stay out for a number of days?
It can stay out year-round if that's what someone chooses to do with the sign allowance that they have for their property.
Okay, but not on right-of-way, right?
No signs are allowed in the right-of-way without the permission of the government.
Okay, and let me ask you a hypothetical question. In the city ordinance, it's mentioned that the right-of-way, is it, let's say if I got a business and is it 10 feet from the right, the city has control of 10 feet from the right-of-way in a residential area or business area?
That's not universally true, no. There may be easements within that space, but in general, the city controls to the right-of-way, and then the individual that owns the rest of the property has control over that. But there may be some instances where there's an easement or something that would change that.
Okay. So how would a person that's putting out campaign signs know if he or she is on a right-of-way?
Generally, it can be assumed based on where public infrastructure might be, where utility poles are, or the sidewalk. You know, as long as you're on your property side of the sidewalk or the utility poles or other utilities, generally that's your property as opposed to the right-of-way.
Okay. So, and you did say that campaign signs can stay out year-round, right?
Yes, they can stay out year-round.
Long as they're on the citizen property and not on the right-of-way?
Yes, as long as they're on private property, people can, as long as it's not vulgar or illegal, people can advertise or put a sign up for anything they want to.
Okay. So in the next census will be 2030, so I can put a 2030 sign out now, right? It will stay at the...
If you choose to, yes, you can.
Okay. I was being a little sarcastic, but you know, I was just on, you know,
well,
just for clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Fuller?
Two questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Warmington?
No questions. I think it's just a great idea to pass this back to the planning board to bring recommendations back, so thank you.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
No question.
I have a few thoughts. First, again, as I mentioned earlier, we need to get the stakeholders involved in this thing. I remember when they passed the first signed ordinance, the biggest complaint most people probably had were mobile signs. They were, you'd ride up and down Slappy and up and down Dawson Road, and they were just every other business. And it looked sort of garish, but you know, this isn't Colonial Williamsburg, and the fact is we have to do whatever it takes to support our brick and mortar businesses. I mean, for instance, I see throughout town these banners. Are they authorized under the sign ordinance?
They are. We do have a permitting procedure and a length of time they're allowed to be up, but a lot of them don't follow the permitting procedure. So there are a lot that are up without having proper permits.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I just think we need to change these multi-message, these signs. I imagine that there were some safety concerns originally, you know, with, you got people driving and they're reading these signs, and it's only natural. It's attracting your attention, but if we have them all over town, that's an issue. But likewise, it's whatever we can do to support brick and mortar businesses, and if that's the most efficient and least expensive way for them to advertise, you know, we have to take that into consideration. All that being said, I just think we need to make sure the business community is aware that we're considering these changes and that the stakeholders have an opportunity to be heard. But at the end of the day, I also want to make sure whatever amendments are enacted, that we are willing and able to enforce them, because it really gets to be a joke when you have a sign ordinance and you have as many people violating it as abiding by it. It's not fair. But then also, getting back to what Commissioner Howard said, we used to have a limit on the number of political signs you could have in a yard. And I think there's some cases, aren't there, Mr. Davis, that say basically you can't restrict somebody's political speech?
Well, that's exactly correct, yes.
Yeah,
There's a lot
okay.
of cases at the Supreme Court. One city tried to take a case against an individual who had a sign in the yard and it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, that would be a difference with a homeowner as opposed to a commercial signage, I'm sure. But Mr. Jenkins knows what he's doing, and I assume he's taken all that. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to go through it's what, 25 pages, but I will go through it over the next week and see what the changes are. But with that, any other questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
No further questions.
Mr. Fuller?
No, sir.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No further questions.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yeah, one quick question. So the variance section in this that's dealing with this latest zoning of property in order to have a sign. That's what would cover. We would give a property owner a variance to go put a sign, even though the zoning may not.
It could deal with that. I mean, it would deal with more issues than that as well. My initial recommendation to the Planning Commission was to change the ordinance to some number of feet. So if the proposed sign is within 150 feet of a residential area, zoned or used, then it would not be allowed. If it's further than that, it could be allowed. We can look at both options to see which really makes more sense. A variance procedure is needed, I believe, either way. But I think it might be cleaner if we had a standard, and maybe that's in the variance. If someone applies for a variance for a multi-message sign, we judge it based on how close it is to a residential area.
Right. Okay. All right. That's it.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
Okay. Ms. Subadin, we can, what
Yes,
approach
ma'am.
are we going to take to make sure that businesses are aware that we're considering comprehensively amending the sign ordinance?
Well, this is a request for you to send it to the Planning Commission for it to be reviewed. So, of course, it will be, if you vote on this next week to send it to the Planning Commission, we'll be sure to do a fair amount of marketing to let people know this is happening. And then when it comes back to you, there will be public hearing.
Okay, I understand that, but I mean, I think businesses ought to be involved or aware of the process from the very beginning, as opposed to, so I just think we need to coordinate this with the Chamber of Commerce and, okay. Thank you, Ms. Forgy.
We'll do it.
Mr.
Ma'am?
Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Could I ask Mr. Paul one question before
Sure.
you leave? Paul, you did say about these campaign signs can stay up as long as for a number of years, right?
Yes, sir.
But let me ask you, okay, what about if a candidate lost the election? When we receive information from the voter registration office that he or she has like 7 days to pick up the signs, right?
If they're on property and the property owner agrees to having the sign there, they don't have to have them picked up.
So they can stay there indefinite?
We do have maintenance standards, so as long as they're not in the right of way, as you said before, or starting to deteriorate significantly, they can stay up as long as the property owner wants them to stay up.
Okay, and at the same time, like the mayor said, we need to have a public hearing, that you have a lot of these tax offices, and they come in and attach signs and for concert to utility pole, so that is still prohibited, right?
That is prohibited.
Okay. And code enforcement will take them down?
Code enforcement looks for that regularly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Forgy. Next item is a recommendation to purchase 14 2021 hybrid Ford Pursuit utility interceptor vehicles from Sunbelt Ford for a total expenditure of $546,981. Good morning, Ms. Fields.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Are you going to address this item?
Yes, sir. This is a request to purchase 14 2021 hybrid Ford Pursuit utility interceptor vehicles. The bid was duly advertised in all the usual places. We had 3 bids that were received. Sunbelt Ford was not the low bidder, but they have asked to exercise a local preference option, which makes them now the recommended bidder. And you see the pros and cons on there. Our recommended action is to award to Sunbelt Ford in the amount of $546,981. Mr. Bednar is available to answer any detailed questions about the vehicle.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions? Commissioner Fuller,
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher,
No question.
Commissioner Warmington,
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff,
No question.
Commissioner Young.
No questions.
Just the funding source, the capital improvement fund budget, what is that, please?
I'm gonna let Mr. Bednar talk about that.
Mayor, I can jump in.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
When we prepared the budget, especially for general fund departments, there's a capital improvement fund, and we set aside funding for things like equipment, building upgrades in there, that building upgrades over a certain dollar amount.
So this is a budgeted item?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Can we move to the next agenda item? It is a recommendation that we accept a grant for that would fund constructions of amenity to the connector trail. Mr. Forgy, good morning again.
Good morning again. Yes, sir, this is a request to accept a grant that we received from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources through the Recreational Trail Grant Program. And this is for amenities on the downtown connector trail. This includes a few things, including signage for the trail, a small trailhead at the north end on North Monroe, some amenities along the way, such as benches or drinking fountains, perhaps, and the restoration of about 1,100 feet of trail that connects the southern end of the trail from the back of Thronatisca to the current Riverfront Trail. The application was funded at the maximum award of $200,000, and it's going to be matched through T-SPLOST by the city at $60,000. So the total grant project is $260,000.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions?
No question.
Commissioner Fuller,
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher,
No question.
Commissioner Warmington,
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff,
No questions.
Commissioner Young.
No questions.
I just want to commend staff for the success in submitting this application, and also in conjunction with what Ms. Beasley was referring to earlier about the directional signage. I think this could really work to improve the general appearance of the city, which is one of the objectives this commission has set forth. Appreciate it, Mr. Forgy.
You're welcome.
And you're going to stay with us. The next item is regarding submitting an application for mitigation funding through CDBG. Could you tell us about that, please, sir?
Yes, sir. This is a request that the Commission approve to submit applications for CDBG DR funding, and that is Community Development Block Grant for Disaster Recovery, specifically for mitigation. And we are proposing to submit two separate applications. One is City of Albany single application for work on the combined sewer. There's a larger project that we are selecting a small project to submit because the overall scope of the smaller project falls into the funding available through this grant program. We're looking at two different projects within the 8th Avenue Basin, and the rough cost estimate initially is about $6.8 million. There is no match required on this funding. Now this, as you may remember, this is a part of a pool of money that was awarded to the state through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The total funded to the state is almost $27 million. Half of that has to come to 3 zip codes that were considered the most impacted, one being Albany and Dougherty County. The other 2 zip codes are in Glenn County and Camden County. So for half of this money, we're competing against two other counties, basically. There's money for infrastructure work, which the sewer project I mentioned is under infrastructure, and there's also money for planning. The other project we're proposing to work jointly with the county on a planning project, which would be an inventory of every single property within the county, which would be a comprehensive inventory looking at the conditions of that property, be it vacant or structure. The primary purpose of this money is to either mitigate damage from the storms. This grant was for the 2017 storm, so specifically for the tornadoes. But while it's not all been repaired, a lot of that damage has been repaired. So this grant can be used for mitigating those damages or for making the community more resilient in the future. So this survey we're talking about is going to look at the condition of buildings, if there's damage still from the storms, if they're in poor condition anyway, so we have an inventory and a computerized database of where these problems exist throughout the community. We'll look at floodplains to determine if the structures within floodplains are built to the proper standards or if they need to be retrofitted to comply with the floodplain regulations. The final database will be in a computerized format. We're going to work with TAC to include it in the database that they've been working on, and this will be available to the public, to local government. It will help many different departments. It'll help for planning purposes. It'll help for future grant writing purposes. The police department, the fire department, the tax department, they all will have access to this database to pull information for. But we are selling this, and it will be most initially useful for disaster recovery, so we can really inventory the community and see what damage is still out there and how we can make the community more resilient going forward. That one I don't have an estimate for, but there is $2 million dedicated to planning funds for those 3 zip codes I mentioned. So it's not going to be that much. We're looking perhaps in the neighborhood of $1 million for that survey, because we do want it to be extremely comprehensive.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy.
You're
Mayor
welcome.
Pro Tem, any questions?
No question. I think you explained it well, and I'm glad to see that. So I won't go out here and running my mouth saying that we're going to get the $26 million, that it will be shared between Glenn County and Camden County.
Commissioner Fuller?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Warmington?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
Ms. Superintendent, I thought this was like $35 million. Or is that what the state got, and 29.6 is divided between these 3 counties?
I think Paul might be in a better position to answer that. I think some of the funding has to be used for housing. Is that correct, Paul?
That's correct. This is quite confusing. There are several CDBG-DR grants available. The one you're referring to is the CDBG-DR unmet needs. This one is mitigation. The unmet needs was funded at a higher rate, and the unmet needs has been determined to be housing exclusively. So CDBG-DR for unmet needs is housing, and that was at a higher rate. And the county is administering that program and is about to roll that out.
Okay.
Is rolling that out currently.
Okay. I had mentioned before, that is the money that I said we ought to hold a public hearing on, because there are people, particularly in East Albany, that thought they would have funding 18 months ago, and still are not sort of in the dark about it. But thank you, Mr. Forgy.
You're welcome.
Mayor, I did ask the county to come before you in February, to give you an update on that, the unmet needs portion of the grant.
Thank you, ma'am. The next item on the agenda is proposed energy conservation loan program. Mr. Stock, Ms. Singleton, who's going to be speaking to this?
Good morning. This is Mary Singleton. First, we'd like to offer the commissioners who are on the Quality of Life Committee an opportunity if they'd like to speak about it beforehand.
Okay. Who's on the committee? I know Commissioner Warmington is. Who else? Okay. Commissioner Fuller, you have anything to say to this?
No, sir, just, you know, I appreciate everybody's work from staff and from the other commissioners on the commission, so ready to move forward. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Warburton?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying, we've all agreed that we need some help with our housing stock in Albany, from the conditions to the energy efficiency. And so many of the complaints that we get about utilities, I believe, comes from the poor energy efficiency standards that we have primarily in some of our rental properties. And so for a rental property to have a utility bill higher than the rent is unacceptable. And so, you know, one criticism I've heard of this program is this won't make a dent. And true, our dent is so big that any help, and so, you know, this may help 20 properties, maybe 50 properties, but we've got to start somewhere. And if we do this over a course of several years, then we can start making a dent. But I do appreciate staff, you know, they gave us several examples from some other cities. This is something that other cities are doing. They put this program together. The utility board has vetted it. And so I'm excited to get this rolled out. And, you know, we're looking for those 20 to 30 property owners to come forward and let's get started improving our housing stock. Albeit small, but we need to make a start somewhere, and over the course of time, we'll make a big impact.
Thank you. Mr. Young?
Yeah, I just kind of had a question, and maybe Commissioner Warrington remembers, but was this loan program, was this going to be tied to the actual energy rate that the occupant had? Like if somebody was experiencing, you know, a real high utility rate, or is this just for any property owner that shows up?
Yeah, so I guess there's two parts to that question. One, this is purely for the property owner. And so if the property owner doesn't want to do it, you know, that's totally on them. And so, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an environment to where there's pressure on owners. So, you know, we talked about doing a call before you move program, where we're trying to assist renters that before you move into a property, you call and get some utility history. And, you know, and my statement is it won't take just a couple of renters who declines, I'm not going to rent this property because utility, that the property owner then will say, whoa, maybe I should do something about my property. So we're trying to do some things to give the tools to, you know, renters, but we need them as well as this program to keep putting pressure on our property owners to just bring their properties up to standard, whether it be gaps in windows and doors or whatever's causing utilities to be extremely high. But yeah, this program is purely for the owner, whether it be a homeowner or the landlord that owns a rental property.
Okay, so can we make sure that we capture that information? You know, what type of, I guess, you know, energy savings that particular property owner might have before they got this particular appliance or use these funds to, you know, do some type of energy conservation, because again, the real, you know, impetus is this is supposed to help folks, as Commissioner Warburton said, who have exorbitant light bills. And, you know, while, you know, we want to help homeowners and property owners, and I guess in indirectly landlords, the real effect for this is trying to give people some relief from high utility bills. So we just need to make sure we're doing everything we can to do that.
Ms. Singleton?
Okay. We're here to ask for your approval for this energy conservation program for residential homeowners. Loans would be financed for up to 5 years and up to $7,500 per loan with 0 interest and no penalty for early payoff. Currently, the city's weatherization program assists low-income seniors aged 62 and above. The program weatherizes the home to make it more energy efficient and help lower utility costs by installing insulation, using LED bulbs, and reducing air filtration. The proposed loan program will enhance the current program by being offered to any residential homeowner in the city's electric utility territory. There will be no income eligibility requirements. Loans will be approved if the customers meet the utility payment history with no more than 1 late fee, no cutoff fee for the past 12 months, and they meet the established program criteria. Loans can be used for Energy Star compliant HVAC systems, programmable thermostats, water heaters, installation, testing, repair, and sealing of windows and doors. The pros of this program is that this program would provide a borrowing means for customers to make cost savings, energy efficiency improvements to their homes, which should lower their utility bills because their consumption should be lower. Staff recommends approval of the Energy Conservation Loan Program, and the proposed funding level to begin would be around $250,000 for the first year. Depending on how it works out, it may ask for an increase later. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Ms. Stockton, do you have anything to add?
I think just to, comment on or to answer Commissioner Young's first question, definitely, sir, we would track the performance, of the projects, the properties that are serviced, because absolutely, the goal of this program is to, have the energy efficiency and to see that. And if we see, work being done without the results, then obviously, we're going to have to reevaluate the type of items that we're approving for the loan program. But I'm available for other questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Fuller? Any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Warbington?
Yeah, the only question for staff would be, I guess, once we vote on this next week, when will this program kick off? When would you be accepting applications, that sort of thing?
We'd look to tongue-tied. We'd look to kick it off as soon as possible. We have a little bit of flow charting yet to do, and with the way the pandemic has us a little bit limited to virtual contact, we have a couple more items to address. But as soon as we would be able to kind of work out the logistics of getting documentation and getting it signed, then we would put that out. Hopefully, as soon as possible, those proper answers.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young? That's all. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions? I passed you over.
No question.
I just think this is a movement in the right direction. I mean, I think the existing program, it's available only to property owners, homeowners, and occupants. Is that correct, Ms. Singleton?
The current weatherization program is to seniors 62 and above.
Okay. Well, this is now available for landlords. It's shows that the city's trying to make an effort to address a problem that we all realize has an inordinate impact upon people living at or below the poverty level, as Mr. Warburton said. When you got residents paying more of the utility bills and their rent, well, you have a problem, and we're taking the initiative here to address it, and I appreciate y'all's work. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next, I think, is the city manager's report. Ms. Subadan?
Sorry, I was muted. We will be sending out an electronic report. As I shared with you last week, we are transitioning back to virtual for functions that can be virtual. So we have individuals working remotely. The number of our impacted employees on COVID that are either quarantining or directly infected has grown exponentially in the last several weeks. We had to close the drive-through and are managing that situation with remote pay locations, as well as making online payments easier and expanding how we use our night drop We've also created a way for people to look up their account numbers, because what we learned is a lot of individuals come to the drive-through or to the office because they don't have their account number. So we are gonna be putting that out, so that individuals can look up their account number pretty simply by putting in their name and address. Beyond that, I am subject to your questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the city manager? Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Superdan, have we done a PSA or notified the city employees and the public about certain departments will be working from home?
Yes, sir, we sent out a press, we sent out notifications and, some press information was sent out, as well as we sent out, obviously, our Facebook has been updated with our latest status.
Okay, so would you also do something with the local television station to remind the public, those that may not have Facebook, a cell phone, senior citizen?
Sure, we'll put something on Channel 16 as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fuller?
Nothing at this time.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No comment.
Commissioner Warmington?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
Thank you, Ms. Subadan. At this point in time, Ms. Davis, could you just give us some explanation about the proposed legislation that you sent out? I really didn't understand it, and like Commissioner Young, I had some questions about it. Could you tell us?
I don't have a copy of it. Is it the one about the, oh, okay, thank you.
And I guess what we need to know is how would this change the appointment process for municipal governments, I guess?
Well, the change would be to meet these requirements. It looks like they're mandating that specific groups, Board of Commission shall use its best efforts to represent as many groups of minority persons as possible, is a summary of it. And then, in case the federal government was going to enforce, or the state, there's a provision at the end that would require each of the authorities to designate an individual to retain the applications so that they would be available later, and to ensure that the applications capture what's on page 3, lines 50 through 52, would have to be captured as part of that process. And then there's definitions of Asian American, Native American, et cetera. So it looks like an effort by the legislature to include these specific groups on each board that's configured for the local government. They want the configuration to bear out the population. Thank you.
Any questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
So Nathan, from reading this, it was House Bill 70, and I don't know how it slipped my mind, but I didn't see it. So when would it go into effect, or it's already into effect?
No, sir, it's just proposed right now.
Just proposed, right?
Yes, sir, yeah.
So we don't have to take no action on it this year, right?
No, sir. You might, if you want to contact your local, delegation, but so far, it would be, the key point would be, will it meet the crossover date and actually be, voted upon?
Oh, okay.
They might try to stay in touch with, I think Mr. Dukes is our senior, or Senator Sims, to see how the progress is on making its way through the bureaucracy.
Okay, okay.
Thanks for asking. That's a good thing to try to keep up with it. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Fuller?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Warmington?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
That pretty much answered my questions.
Thank Items for the future agenda, anything? Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Superdan,
Yes, sir.
in looking through Mr. Bill Wright volumes of papers and all that, I made some notation. Our federal lobbyist that is in D.C., which we are almost confident there's going to be another round of stimulus package to states and local jurisdiction, municipality. Can they keep us abreast of what's going on? Because the data that Mr. Wright handed us this morning were not what was in our package that he was trying to present last year, which I think if a lot of it probably could have tapped out if we could have got our lobbyists to get more involved in it. And since they're in the next 48 hours, there will be a changing of the guards in the White House, that we can be abreast of some of these things going on, because looking at some of these that did apply for this PPE money, and very few of it was minority involvement, that if we can get as they present these new bills, that from the Treasury Office down to the Federal Reserve, that if our lobbyists can keep us abreast of what is coming down the barrel, what we need to apply for, and what we need to be aware of.
Yes, sir, I'll be sure to pass that on.
Commissioner Fuller?
Nothing at this time.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No comment.
Commissioner Worthington?
No new business.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing else.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. As you and the commission have seen, that I sent you an email on yesterday evening, and it's a matter of concern with the comments and activities of Commissioner B.J. Fletcher.
Mayor, may I make a point of order, please?
Yes, sir.
Robert's Rules of Order says that we should avoid personalities, avoid comments about each other as members, and this particular item is new business. And so I would like to submit that we talk about new business, future agenda items, and not talk about each other from a personality standpoint.
Could we
That-
put
that's
on
within
this?
Robert's Rules of Order.
This has nothing to do with personality. This has to do with actions and comments of a sitting city commissioner.
Mayor, I would submit that we are not a judicial body. We are a policy-making body, so it's not, this meeting is not to have conversations about each other and accuse each other. It's to have.
There was no
business of the city.
accusations. Everything that I have to say that, that I listed in the email is factual. It's common knowledge, and it's not anything that rises to what Commissioner Worthington is talking about.
Would it be more appropriate to put it on a next agenda?
Well, I'd rather kind of deal with it now, since I did send a email to have it put on the agenda in the first place, but that was not considered, something that I was told to bring it up as a new item.
Mayor, should I say something then, that this looks like it's involving me?
Well, I think I would like to finish my statement since I was interrupted.
Well, excuse me, Commissioner. Commissioner Fletcher, yes, ma'am?
Well, one thing, Mayor and City Attorney, I would like to know if this is being recorded, and if not, I would like to request that it be recorded. And second, I want to know, City Attorney, is it appropriate for commissioners to use this public platform to facilitate a political smear campaign against a colleague, especially when that colleague was acting in their own capacity as an individual citizen and not in any official capacity as an elected official? I would like that answered.
Well, it sounds as if, I still had my comment on the floor, and she's trying to introduce another comment.
Well,
So, you know, if it's going to be a point of order, I had the floor, so I don't want to be interrupted.
I think
with-
that's correct, but,
I'm sorry, I thought you gave me the floor, Mayor.
no, ma'am, I did to speak, but I thought you'd completed your comments.
No, sir, I have not, I just started. But I would like that question answered. Is this appropriate, Mr. Davis, before Mr. Young finishes his comments? Is this appropriate to use this platform to do this? And I would like these comments to be on the record.
Mr. Davis, before we go forward with this, I mean, just so we all understand, I think there's some concern about some statements Commissioner Fletcher's made about the presidential election. Is that correct, Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir, and her actions.
Okay, and is whether or not that is appropriate issue, Mr. Davis?
Well, I agree with Commissioner Worthington that Robert's Rules of Order certainly requires a certain level of decorum, and that if I saw an email which I haven't fully digested or gone through, but I would suggest it not be at this meeting. It's not on the agenda, no notice was given, so I think everybody who's the subject of a comment by their colleague would be entitled to some sort of notice about what may come up.
Okay, with that, Commissioner Young, could we just put this on a future agenda?
Sure.
I mean, I honestly didn't see the email. I know there's some concern about this, and I think there ought to be more responsibility in the country for elected officials and some of the things that have been said and actions that have been taken in recent weeks. But
Exactly.
can we take that and just put this on a future?
Well, I'll just leave it at this, Mayor. As you said, we are at a critical time in this transition, and I think we as elected officials should be held accountable for the things that we say publicly. I think we ought to be held accountable for the things that we do. And, you know, if we don't take up the issue, when the issue happens, it gets swept under the rug. And then we're dealing with stuff like we had to deal with in Washington, D.C. You know, all because, you know, people want to play fast and loose with the truth. And that's what needs to be called out. And as I said in my email, there are uncomfortable conversations that we have to have. And if you're not comfortable showing leadership, you should, you know, not be in leadership. You know, we can't always talk about personalities. We're talking about what somebody says, what somebody does. That puts other people in jeopardy, in danger, causes a smear to our democracy and our
Point of order, Mayor.
Okay.
May I bring up another point of order?
Again, I'm being interrupted.
There's insinuations of, there are insinuations of motives
I would like to
and
finish
of
my
wrongdoing,
statement.
and we all know
I
who
would
he's
like to
referring
finish
to,
my
and it's not
statement,
appropriate to
Mr.
do
Mayor.
that in the setting of
We
a
went
city
all the way
commission
around the
meeting.
Commissioner
horn,
Worthington,
and I'm speaking.
Commissioner Young, I mean, I thought we were going to put this on the agenda, a future agenda.
Well, if you can, I'm not speaking to the matter. I'm speaking to why we need to handle this. Now, I can get into what happened, but if I'm not allowed to speak, then I already understand what's going to happen here. And the public will understand what's happening here.
Okay, well, all I'm asking is, can we put this on a future agenda? I thought that was agreed, we could do that.
Yes, sir, but I was still finishing making my statement. I would like to finish.
Okay, yes, sir.
Okay? So
Wait, the point of order was what, Commissioner Worthington?
So the point of order in our comments is we should avoid attacking each other, making insinuations of wrongdoing. If we don't talk about future agenda item, let's talk about the future agenda item as it relates to the business of the city, not attacking each other in terms of what may or may not be the truth. That's what we have the court of law for. That's not the purpose of this body. So that's the point of order, is to stop doing that.
Well, this is
in our
not
conversation.
even a issue of law. It's an issue of conduct. It's an issue of truth. And, you know, we've had everything from people reading poems to talking about a whole lot of things in their final comments to this body. But it's until somebody wants to speak the truth and be a voice for the community at large, is that when we want to, you know, talk about, oh, we shouldn't talk about this because it's unpleasant, we shouldn't attack each other. Sometimes you just have to tell the truth, and it's not about attacking each other. But I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and this issue, I mean, Commissioner Young, do you want it on a future agenda? I do. Okay, yes, sir, we would do that. I just would like an
Mayor, may I ask a point of clarity?
Yes, sir.
What is the future item? What is the topic or what's on the agenda for the future from everything that was just said?
Thank you, Mr. Warburton.
The thing that's on the agenda is the conduct of Commissioner Fletcher. As I said in my email, I spelled it out. I'll give you another copy if you didn't read it. I'll make it available to the press. You know very well what the agenda item is about. Everybody's been talking about it for almost 2 weeks now.
So again, please clear up what is going to be the agenda item. Is it smear? Is it, what is it, Mayor?
I mean, I'm not positive, Commissioner Fletcher, but I guess if we put it on the agenda, we can all have notice, and if it's not an appropriate item for a city commission agenda, we just won't address it.
Mayor, it is absolutely wrong to put the conduct of a commissioner. You could say
It
the
is
conduct of
absolutely
Chad
not.
Warmington.
That's in the
And so
charter.
if you want to,
That's in
talk
the
about
charter.
let's just talk about the conduct of Chad Warmington.
That's in
What
the
do you want to put
charter.
out there for the public to see about
That's
Chad Warmington?
in the charter.
What are we going to see about each
If
of the
you
individuals?
can't talk about the conduct
So
of
the
a
conduct
public
of
official
individuals
at the
if
public forum,
so-
where can you talk about it about?
Okay. Mr. Davis, can you get us what the charter says about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So
And-
far, as I can tell, there's no formal censure policy in your
Yeah.
charter.
Well, I mean, I think if I had a client accusing me of misappropriation of funds or some unethical action or immoral action, I don't know if it'd be appropriate for me to be castigated by the commission, but let's just see what the situation is, and otherwise.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure if I dug deep enough, I could probably find some misconduct, as you're just alleging about yourself. So how far are we going to go in this commission to say, if I hear something or somebody said something I didn't like, and it may be edgy, it may be, but at what point are we going to always bring conduct of each other up?
There's a long list between edgy and a lie. There's a long way between something that's, you know, quote
Okay,
unquote,
so
not
if I tell a
unpleasant
lie,
to hear,
every time I
or
tell a lie, it's
something
going to
that's-
come in front of the city commission?
Something
Is
that's
that what we're
unpleasant
saying
and
now?
something that's the actual
I mean,
truth.
Commissioner Warburton.
I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with any, I'm just saying the conduct of a commissioner.
Right.
Where are we going to draw the line? Are we going to bring something up every time one of us does something wrong, or we do something in our own businesses or in the community, or if we're
When it
subject to some
affects
investigation, does
public
it come up
safety,
in front of the
when
commission?
it
I mean, where do
affects
you
public
draw the
safety-
line at?
Wait, gentlemen, who's got the floor now?
Well, I don't know. I thought I had the floor, but then everybody is speaking over me.
Okay.
So, you know, but when, to Commissioner Warburton's point, when it affects public safety, as we see that the comments of elected officials, especially from the highest office in the land, can cause an incident like it caused in DC, we need to speak to that.
Okay, well, we've agreed we're gonna look at the charter and tentatively put this on the next agenda. Is that understood? And if it's not a proper agenda item, the city commission won't address it, but of course, the respective commissioners can have their own say in the public forum, just not
All right, sir.
in the course of
Mr. Mayor,
meeting.
could I
Okay.
say something?
Ma'am? Yes, ma'am, certainly.
Well, it looks, and I might be wrong, but it looks like, what I'm being accused of is lying about something. So if I think Mr. Warburton, Commissioner Warburton is right, it would be hard for me to believe that we could take the People's Forum and make it a personal smear campaign, but I could be wrong, I'm not a lawyer. But I would say that if there is going to come up an allegation of any one of us telling a lie, we need to make sure there is proof of that lie. Because if you are accused of something and you can't prove it, then it will not be out there. So I thank y'all for trying to do the right thing. Mr. Davis, I think you need to again make sure that I ask you on record was this appropriate. And, Mr. Mayor and, Commissioner Warburton, Mayor, sure, I appreciate you trying to figure out what's right, but I would think with, 3 lawyers and the work that Commissioner Warburton does, I would think that we could get a definite answer on this. And as long as we're doing something that is legal, and it's not simply a smear campaign, because several of us are up for election this year, I will entertain listening to it, but I want to make sure it's legal. This commission seems to just be a part of wanting to be Robert Rules of Order. So as long as it fits those guidelines, I will be awaiting y'all's decision. Have a good day.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Mayor, Commissioner, and everyone.
I would like an update, Ms. Subadan, on the sidewalks for Broad Avenue, and what, if any, communication or correspondence has been about the folks that put gates along the trail. And finally, I think we need to have some more information about this presentation we received from Mr. Wright. If we can access funds to help struggling, disadvantaged business, we certainly owe that to our citizens. And if the loan terms are as favorable as presented here today, I don't see much reason why we don't go after it and go after it aggressively.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, with that, we'll stand adjourned.